Chapter 1399. Are these king prawns? Lord Go had never thought that prawns could taste like sweet and sour ribs. He must have eaten fake prawns. No wonder Bufang was so confident. It turned out that he was still cooking sweet and sour ribs. Since it was sweet and sour ribs, why didn't you say so earlier? If you had, Lord Go wouldn't have eaten rock meat. Compared with sweet and sour ribs, rock meat was nothing. At most, it was a tasty fart. Lord Go bared his teeth and took another deep breath. A few more prawns flew out, accompanied by white mist that lingered like immortal energy. As soon as the prawns entered his mouth, the taste of sweet and sour ribs exploded. Not only did it have the taste of sweet and sour ribs, but it also had the calming aroma of tea. Lord Go narrowed his eyes. His body swayed slowly in the air, his tail wagging left and right. He was immersed in the delicious taste of sweet and sour ribs. The people around were stunned. Dogs also like to eat prawns? It didn't make sense. Shouldn't dogs like to eat meat and bones? How could those bland shrimps satisfy a dog? Could it be that Lord Go and Bufang had put on a show in order to win this chef's challenge? Many people couldn't help but have such a thought in their mind. Zhuang's eyes shrank as he looked at the black dog's intoxicated look. As a chef, he could naturally tell whether a dish was real or not from the expression on a diner's face. There was no doubt that this black dog was deeply intoxicated by the prawns. Damn it! He didn't expect that a dog would like to eat prawns instead of meat. There was actually a dog in this world that didn't eat meat. Hades Era and Fire Demon Patriarch narrowed their eyes, feeling the change in the taste of the prawns in their mouth. When they opened their eyes, there was only amazement in their eyes. Once again, they flew over, picked up the prawns with chopsticks, and prepared to send them into their mouths. Spicy strips, the taste of the sea. Hades Era and Fire Demon Patriarch shouted at the same time. The people present were shocked once again. They tasted spicy strips after eating prawns? There was actually such a thing? And what the hell was that smell of the sea? Everyone present was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say. Slurp, slurp. The void was so quiet that only Hades Era, Fire Demon Patriarch, and Lord Go were left eating shrimps. The bouncy prawns bounced around in his mouth, as if they were gently knocking against the walls of his mouth. After a long time, the shrimps were finished. All that was left of the plate of prawns was a lotus plate carved from a spirit fruit. There was some milky white juice, and some scattered leaves of the 9 Revolution Heavenly Path tea tree, but the prawns were all gone. Buzz, the wheel of law in the sky changed. It actually began to slowly revolve, and there seemed to be the power of laws bursting out from it, entangling with it. Runes of law flew out of Lord Go, Hades Era, and Fire Demon Patriarch and poured into them. The radiance of the stars appeared. Obviously, the final evaluation was about to begin. Everyone's eyes were drawn to the stars in the sky. They also wanted to know the outcome of this match. Could Owner Bu continue to create miracles in the face of a dish cooked by a god? Zhuang took a deep breath, and his aura fluctuated. His cooking utensils disappeared. However, his aura became more and more oppressive. For some reason, he, who had always been confident, felt a little crisis this time. Yes, it was a sense of crisis. For some reason, he felt that he was going to lose this match. Impossible. How could I lose? This guy is just a mortal. I'm the god of Chef's Challenge. Zhuang's eyes burst into bright light. Rumble. Hades Era's evaluation came out. The light of the stars lit up in the sky. The speed was slow, neither fast nor slow. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, everyone held their breath and stared at the stars in the sky. Looking at the stars that were formed, they burst forth with light. Their eyes were filled with shock. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the stars in the sky. His face was expressionless, and he was very calm. He was very confident. His confidence was like a heaven-shaking wave, battering Zhuang's mind. It made Zhuang hesitate. Why is this mortal so confident? That mysterious power can't work on dishes. Why is he so confident? Good heavens! It's 8 stars. No, no. It's 9 stars. It's a tie. The audience widened their eyes. When they saw the stars under the wheel of law stop shining after 9 stars lit up, they sucked in cold breaths and exclaimed, 9 stars. It was the same score as Zhuang. This meant that there was still suspense in this chef's challenge between a god and a mortal. Bufang's face was calm as he stood where he was. Looking at the stars in the sky, the corners of his mouth curved upward. Why? Why did a shrimp get 9 stars? It's actually equal to my rock meat. Zhuang seemed a little unconvinced. He lowered his voice and asked. This question was directed at Hades Era. Hades Era raised his hand to rub his sharp chin. Then, he flicked his hair and revealed a gentle smile. Bufang, young man's dish. How do I put it? Perhaps it's not as strong as your rock meat, but it has a silky taste, like a little stream lingering in my heart. It can sense what you need. Bufang's eyes widened as he spoke. Hades Era's eyes seemed to shine. He was savoring the shrimp's taste. What he said was fair. The 9 Revolution Great Path shrimp was not as spicy as the rock meat. However, this dish had a unique meaning. That kind of meaning could be said to be emotion. A dish with emotions shocked Nether King Ha a lot. He could even taste the spicy strip. This was the taste of the spicy strip he dreamed of. Spreading his arms, Hades Era's hair fluttered despite the absence of wind. Zhuang gritted his teeth. What kind of F***king dish has emotion? How could a dish have emotion? Even though he was the god of Chef's Challenge, he had never heard that a dish could have emotion. A dish is a dead thing. Nonsense. Zhuang snorted softly, then turned his eyes to Fire Demon Patriarch. The shock and intoxication on the latter's face when he ate his dish did not seem to be fake. Perhaps there will be a miracle in Fire Demon Patriarch. Over the wheel of law, the rating star belonging to Fire Demon Patriarch emerged. Slowly, it began to light up. Bufang raised his head and looked at the wheel. Is this Fire Demon Patriarch's rating? Perhaps this will become a decisive key score. Everyone was watching. Fire Demon Patriarch was curious. He didn't know how many points he would give the shrimp in his heart. In fact, the flavor that made his heart palpitate made Fire Demon Patriarch's expression change a little. If he could give this dish a score himself, he hoped it would be 10,000 points. Because this dish really gave him an unprecedented experience. Rather than calling it a dish, it was more of a feeling that transcended the soul. I finally know the taste of the sea. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, under everyone's gaze, Fire Demon Patriarch's rating star kept lighting up. Before long, it was shining brightly. 10 stars stood side by side in the sky, dazzling and dazzling. All 10 stars were lit up. Everyone stared blankly. They were dumbfounded and shocked. They didn't know what to say. Full stars. All 10 stars lit up. This was an extremely unbelievable matter. Zhuang's body trembled. Even with his vision as a god, he was shocked beyond words. 10 stars. Sure enough, everything is fake. Why? Zhuang's eyes turned red, and a terrible aura burst out of him like a thunderclap that was about to blow up everything. Fire Demon Patriarch's body trembled, and he felt an unprecedented fear. This fear made his heart tremble. I told you that a dish that can extinguish my flame is the most delicious dish. This plate of prawns, did it? Fire Demon Patriarch couldn't help but say, his body trembling. As a fire demon, I've never felt the taste of the sea because I can't experience the feeling of the warm seawater flowing through my throat. But when I ate the prawns, I felt the taste of the sea. Fire Demon Patriarch closed his eyes, and the flame on his body flickered. He extinguished my flame, so this dish is perfect. 10 stars is not too much. Zhuang flew into a rage. A fist smashed down fiercely. Down below, the entire Netherchef clansland had completely collapsed and turned into ruins. The shattered stones continued to crack, a terrible aura burst out of him like an oven. Fire Demon Patriarch's heart trembled. Only then did he come to his senses. The almighty expert in front of him was a god. Zhuang was furious, but he didn't say anything. After all, with the Wheel of Law, Fire Demon Patriarch couldn't fake it. However, he was still very upset. Finally, he turned his eyes and fixed them on the black dog. Now, his only hope was this black dog. It only gave his rock meat 8 stars, which showed that this dog was very picky. This meant that this dog was very picky. How many points would such a picky dog give Bufang's prawns? The dog's rating was the key. So far Zhuang's star score was already 1 star behind Bufang. If he wanted to win the chef's challenge, he had to give the Lord Go a 6-star rating. Only then could Zhuang win with a 1-star gap. If he gave the dish 7 stars, because the first to be tasted had an advantage. Even if the number of stars was equal, the winner would still be Bufang. Zhuang was under great pressure. He clenched his fist. Behind Zhuang's back, a powerful illusory figure seemed to be able to blot out the sky. Even a god would be excited at such a moment. They would also look forward to a miracle. Bufang exhaled softly. I've raised a dog for 1,000 days, but I'll use it for a moment. Don't let me down, Lord Go, thought Bufang. His mind settled down. The runes of law rose from Lord Go's body and rushed into the Wheel of Law. Buzz, it was as if thunder was surging and rumbling. Soon, 10 unlit stars appeared in the Wheel of Law in the sky again. These stars belonged to Lord Go. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, under the watchful eyes of the audience. The radiance of the stars gradually brightened, and soon it reached 9 stars. 9 stars? The result was out. There was no delay. However, this result refreshed everyone's worldview. 9 stars. Lord Go only gave Zhuang's rock meat 8 stars. Instead, he gave Bufang's prawns 9 stars. What did this mean? It meant that Bufang's prawns had won the chef's challenge. Didn't dogs like to eat meat? Since when could prawns win the Lord Go's favor? Not only Zhuang, but everyone else was confused. They had guessed the beginning correctly, but they had guessed the ending incorrectly. Lord Go's rating of 9 stars, that made Bufang's score crush Zhuang's. In this chef's challenge, Bufang won. The result was out. The power of law in the sky made the final evaluation. Rumble, a terrible aura seemed to rise and fall. The Wheel of Law rumbled and surged, spinning toward Zhuang's body. Crack! Crack in front of everyone's eyes. Zhuang's body slowly began to crumble from his lower body. Slowly crumbled. Slowly crumbled. Zhuang's eyes were fixed on the black dog and Bufang. How could my rock meat lose? Zhuang growled. The god of chef's challenge roared behind his body. That was a roar of indignation. He was a dignified god, but he actually lost to a mortal in cooking. Lord Go stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Do you think that's an ordinary prawn? A prawn that tastes like sweet and sour ribs is definitely not an ordinary prawn. Lord Go snorted. Losing to sweet and sour ribs is not an injustice. Opportunistic mortals. I will not forgive all of you. Zhuang roared, his eyes red. His body was constantly crushed by the Wheel of Law. Finally, as the roar faded, Zhuang's head was completely shattered. Chapter 1400. No one had expected this. It was going to be a crushing chef's challenge. Bufang had defeated Zhuang, who was possessed by the god of chef's challenge, with an overwhelming number of stars. It was not even a thrilling victory, but a victory by a large margin. For this kind of chef's challenge, a gap of 2 stars was a big score. The god of chef's challenge was crushed by a mortal. Wasn't this god of chef's challenge too weak? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They watched as Zhuang, who was constantly being crushed by the Wheel of Law in midair. The law in the Wheel of Law was the law of Chef's Challenge, which represented the rules and order of the Chef's Challenge. Even though Ah Zhuang was possessed by the god of Chef's Challenge, he could not get rid of the restraint of the law. So, in the end, he was destroyed by the power of the law and turned into dust. It was terrible, very terrible. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang hovered in midair with a calm face. It was as if he had defeated the so-called god of Chef's Challenge, and there was no surprise or joy in his eyes. In fact, for Bufang it was just a normal operation. After the Wheel of Law had destroyed Ah Zhuang, it slowly dissipated. Among them, an invisible force drifted toward Bufang. The Chef's Challenge with Ah Zhuang was that everything that belonged to the loser would belong to the loser. However, the god of Chef's Challenge had played a trick, so even if he lost, it was not the god of Chef's Challenge who was destroyed, but Ah Zhuang. Since Ah Zhuang's body was gone, his treasures and some other things belonged to Bufang. Of course, in Bufang's view, these things were not precious. They were all very ordinary things. With a flip of his hand, he packed them up and put them into the system's storage space. After that, Bufang slowly descended to the ground. At this moment, the Nether Chef clan's land had been completely reduced to ruins. Broken stones kept rolling on the ground. Bufang walked slowly among them. Lord Go, Hades' Era, and the others were also hovering in midair. Lord Go even curled his tongue as if he was looking forward to it. Bufang boy, why do those shrimps taste like sweet and sour ribs? Lord Go asked curiously. He had always been puzzled about this. Lord Dog was sure that Bufang had cooked prawns and not sweet and sour ribs. However, when he took a bite, he tasted the taste of sweet and sour ribs. Did Bufang boy poison Lord Go? Did he poison sweet and sour Go? Sweet and sour sweet and gang? Nether King Ha was also curious because he was different from Lord Dog. What he tasted was the taste of the spicy strip. Bu sour ribs. To say sweet to be the S. Bu tu fong to us one. Bu was the tu sour one. This prawn is not an ordinary one. It's a very valuable ingredient, and it's cooked with the 9-revolution Great Path tea, which contains the will of the Great Path. Besides, it's cooked with an invisible flame, Bufang said. He seemed to be thinking about how to explain. The invisible flame is the essence of many immortal and nether flames left in the Nether Chef clan's homeland. It's considered the essence of fire, and it contains the 7 emotions and 6 desires of many Nether Chefs. Bufang seemed to sigh and exhaled softly. That prawn can only be cooked once. It's fine to call it 9-revolution Great Path prawn, but it's cooked with the will of the Great Path and the Divine Flame. Many emotions in the Divine Flame have been fused into the prawn. That's why you tasted all kinds of flavors. Those are not flavors, but emotions. They are the emotions you yearn for in your heart. The prawn is just a carrier. Even if it has flavors, it will be transformed into the flavors you yearn for. Different people will have different emotions when they eat this dish. That's why you can taste spicy strips, sweet and sour ribs, and the sea. Bufang's explanation was somewhat profound. The crowd was a little confused when they heard it. Divine flame? Where is the fire? Is it the invisible flame Bufang controls? Fire Demon Patriarch had been burned by the flame once, and the flame on his body was almost covered up and disappeared. The power of the flame was extraordinary. Fire Demon Patriarch was a demon who proved his path with fire. His control over flames was very strong, and ordinary flames could not burn him at all. As for the divine flame, Bufang did not explain too much. It was still an invisible flame because Bufang had not fused with the power of the law. According to the system, the divine flame was very powerful, but it needed to fuse with the power of the law. The more laws it fused with, the stronger it would be. Bufang naturally hoped that the power of the divine flame would grow stronger and stronger. But the problem now was, where could Bufang find the power of the law? Bufang touched his chin and was lost in thought. The people around him were immersed in Bufang's explanation. No matter what, the news that Bufang had defeated a god in a chef's challenge shocked everyone. Many people felt incredulous. It turned out that gods were not so high and mighty after all. Swoosh, the wheel of law in the sky had almost dissipated. It was almost gone. When the last wisp of the power of the law disappeared in the void, suddenly, there seemed to be a rumbling sound that rang out. It was a muffled sound. The void was torn apart. A cracking sound rang out, and then a hand stretched out of the rift. With a ripping sound, the rift grew bigger and bigger. A terrible storm swept out as if the void was collapsing and the stars were collapsing. Roar. Accompanied by a furious roar, the void collapsed. Then, a majestic figure crawled out of it. Divine power surged, making the people present feel very depressed, and they couldn't help but lie on the ground. There was a look of shock on everyone's face. Bufang stood where he was and looked at the void, as if he had expected this. Lord Go opened his mouth and yawned, his fur waving in the wind. He didn't seem surprised at all. Di Ting hovered in midair. He looked at the crack in the void, and there seemed to be sympathy in his eyes. The god of Chef's challenge? He's indeed a narrow-minded person. That was right. The figure that emerged from the rift was none other than the god of Chef's challenge. Or rather, it was the god of Chef's challenge's spirit clone that had possessed Zhuang. A spirit clone was a means of a god. It was connected to the consciousness of the god's true self. It could exert about 1/10 of the god's strength. Although it was not much, 1/10 of the god's strength was still the power of a god. How could a mortal fight a god? Rumble. The experts of Earth Prison and Nether Prison all knelt on the ground in fear. They had submitted to the pressure of a god. The aura of a god made them shiver. The terrible power of the law was surging. There were 3,000 laws of all kinds, which were beyond the imagination of people. The god of Chef's challenge's divine sense clone floated in midair after tearing the rift. He turned his eyes and fixed them on Bufang. Originally, when his carrier was destroyed, he should have returned to his true self through the void. But the god of Chef's challenge was unwilling. He had been defeated by a chef in a chef's challenge. This made him lose a lot of face. As a god, how could he lose? Of course, the most important thing was that he couldn't bear to give up Bufang's secret. It was that mysterious power. The aura emanated by the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop attracted him like a deadly poison. So, he came back. He came back again. He wanted to get Bufang's secret. Rumble. In his opinion, when the divine sense clone of a god descended, all the mortals present submitted. Although Bufang controlled that power, he had not grown up yet. He raised his hand. With a greedy look in his eyes, the god of Chef's challenge threw out a palm that blotted out the sky toward Bufang. He wanted to kill Bufang with one palm. Lowly mortal! How dare you offend a god? You will pay the price. The god of Chef's challenge's voice rumbled. On the ground, Bufang furrowed his brows. He didn't expect the god of Chef's challenge to be so shameless as to make a move. Bufang knew very well that the god of Chef's challenge's divine sense clone had returned not only because he had lost the chef's challenge. It was more because of the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop that he had. Here came the problem. Since the god of Chef's challenge coveted the god of cooking's divine power so much, he probably knew where it came from. In that case, what was the relationship between the god of Chef's challenge and the god of cooking? Bufang took a deep breath, and his pupils constricted. As the palm fell, the ground collapsed, sending sand and stones flying. The experts of Earth Prison and Nether Prison fled in horror. A god had made a move. The attack of a god was absolutely shocking. Boom, boom, boom. Bufang stood where he was. His vermilion robe fluttered even though there was no wind, turning crimson as the flaming wings on his back spread out. The ground under Bufang's feet collapsed again. The Nether Chef clan's land was originally located on a high mountain, But now, the mountain had disappeared, and the terrain had sunk, turning from a high mountain into a valley. Buzz, a black dog, was slowly wagging its tail as it floated in the void. Facing the god of Chef's Challenge's palm, Lord Dog's mouth twitched in disdain. Then, he flipped his hand and raised his paw. "You've lost the Chef's Challenge and you still want to come back? Don't you know why you've lost?" Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice rang through the void. It was as if he was asking a question. Facing the god of Chef's Challenge's palm, Lord Go's exquisite paw rose into the air and collided with it. A violent explosion rang out. The energy ripples from the collision spread out in all directions, and the ground seemed to be shaved off a layer as it churned endlessly. Terrible explosions rumbled. The god of Chef's Challenge's palm slowly collapsed and dissipated. Roar. The god of Chef's Challenge let out a deafening roar that shook the whole nether prison. All the living beings knelt on the ground, trembling. Buzz, a golden wheel of law, emerged in front of the god of Chef's Challenge. It was the wheel of law of Chef's Challenge. At this moment, the wheel of law, which represented the order of the Chef's Challenge, was in charge of attack. A muffled whistle rang out. Countless runes of law could be seen swirling over the wheel of law, tearing through the void and heading toward Lord Go, who hovered in midair and stood in front of Bufang. The sky was filled with cracks and turbulence in the void. This was a battle between gods, and when they fought, it represented destruction. Lord Go snorted softly. His body soared into the sky. Then, a deafening dog bark that could block out the sun resounded through the air. A pitch-black dog paw quietly reached out of the void. The paw was densely covered with runes of law, and the aura of time seemed to flow around it. It represented the law of time comprehended by Lord Go, one of the supreme laws of the universe. The law of time collided with the wheel of law of Chef's Challenge. Perhaps the number of laws Lord Go comprehended was not as many as the god of Chef's Challenge, and his fighting prowess was slightly lower, but after all, he had comprehended the supreme law, so Lord Go was not weak at all. On the ground, Bufang, who was worrying about where to find the laws to fuse with the divine flame, looked up. He was slightly stunned as he watched the surging power of law collide in the sky. The next moment, Bufang's eyes lit up. He had searched far and wide, and it turned out that the power of law was waiting for him in front of him. The law of time belonged to Lord Go, and Bufang could not fuse with it. However, it would be a waste if he didn't take the law that the god of Chef's Challenge had sent to him. Chapter 1401. It was like a flash of inspiration. Bufang's eyes lit up as he stared at the god of Chef's Challenge in the sky. He felt that his idea was really feasible. He couldn't touch the Lord Go's law of time, but he could look forward to the god of Chef's Challenge's law. Rumble. The battle continued in the sky, and terrible rumbles kept ringing out. The collision of the power of laws was an invisible collision that affected the depths of everyone's soul, making them tremble and afraid to move. Everyone's mind was shivering. Di Ting, on the other hand, used his divine sense to cover thousands of miles around him, keeping the aftershocks of the battle within this range. As for the experts in the area, Di Ting did not care whether they stayed or left. There was a price to pay for spying on the battle of gods. However, compared to the price, the benefits were also great. For the great sage, the power of laws that escaped from the battle of gods was a rare enlightenment. After all, a battle of gods could not be seen at all. Di Ting floated in midair and assumed the appearance of a little boy. In fact, he quite liked this look. However, in the restaurant, under the threat of Earth Prison Dog, he had to give up this cute little boy image and assume his true form, a short-legged dog. The god of Chef's Challenge was not an ordinary god. At least, Di Ting had no hope of defeating him. Even though it was only a clone of the god of Chef's Challenge this time, it still contained the power of laws. Gods were also ranked according to the number of laws they had comprehended. The god of Chef's Challenge was a god who had comprehended at least 3 laws, which made him stronger than ordinary low-grade gods. Both Earth Prison Dog and Di Ting had just become gods, and they had only comprehended one law. However, just because Di Ting could not defeat him did not mean that Earth Prison Dog could not. After all, Earth Prison Dog had comprehended the supreme law of the universe, and one of them was stronger than many. If Earth Prison Dog was in the divine dynasty, he would be a genius. Rumble. The collision of their divine senses caused the ground to be lifted up and rubble to fly. The wheel of law was constantly rotating, suppressing the void and causing it to constantly make cracking sound. The god of Chef's challenge was burly, and although he was just a clone of his divine sense, he looked exactly the same as his true self. His divine sense controlled the wheel of law and kept bombarding it. The law of time spread out from Lord Go's exquisite paw as he fought back casually. It was very relaxing. Clearly, the god of Chef's challenge didn't put much pressure on him. Even Lord Go felt bored to death at the end of Jean Du Boom. There was a roar. The Lord Go barked again. In an instant, the dog barks seemed to have materialized, forming ripples that spread out in all directions. It continued to spread in the void, blooming majestically. Wherever the ripples passed, time seemed to freeze. Everything slowed down. The god of Chef's challenge's pupils constricted, and his movements slowed. The rotation of the wheel of law became very slow. Time law. The god of Chef's challenge was startled, and he sucked in a cold breath. There was actually a god who had comprehended the edict of time in this remote area? The supreme laws of the universe were supreme. How could ordinary gods comprehend them? Even in the divine dynasty, those who could comprehend it were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Time froze. The others seemed to have been frozen. However, the god of Chef's challenge's cultivation base was still there. Although his movements were restricted, the restraint was not strong. His movements were slow, but it was still much better than being completely frozen. Lord Go walked with cat-like steps, swaying his butt as he came in front of the god of Chef's challenge. Looking at the god of Chef's challenge in front of him, the corners of his mouth curved upward slightly. A divine power! The god of Chef's challenge almost roared in his heart. He couldn't believe he met a black dog who had mastered the supreme law of the universe on the remote edge of the Xiai divine dynasty, and a black dog who had comprehended a divine power at that. What kind of luck was this? Lord Go's divine power is... Time freeze. Lord Go raised his dog paw and waved it in front of the god of Chef's challenge with a faint smile on his face. The next moment, Lord Go's black dog paw was wrapped in a golden hue. This is the divine skill of Lord Go after he became a god, the golden dog paw. Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice exploded in the void. Then, the golden dog paw pointed at the god of Chef's challenge's face. A rumbling sound rang out. The stagnated time suddenly recovered, and the flow of time accelerated. Everyone felt their vision blur for a moment. Then, the originally evenly matched battle turned into a one-sided situation. The god of Chef's challenge flew backward like a broken flower, and his face exploded. Boom! The void collapsed, and his whole head seemed to be smashed. However, it quickly recovered. The recovery ability of a divine sense clone was amazing. However, this recovery had clearly consumed a lot of divine power, so the clone of the god of Chef's challenge had become somewhat illusory. A divine power. Unfortunately, if you had comprehended a few more laws, I, the god of Chef's challenge, would be a little afraid of you. However, you have just become a god. This has given me a chance to turn the tables. Slaughtering a god that has comprehended supreme laws of nature is also very exciting. The god of Chef's challenge's eyes suddenly turned red. The next moment, the power of law swirled around him again. Ghostly green flames spread and burned fiercely. The scorching heat caused the void to distort. The law of fire was the second law the god of Chef's challenge had comprehended. Boom! The void shattered inch by inch. The flames of law burned all over the sky, scattering between heaven and earth. The expressions of some experts, who were watching curiously, changed dramatically at this moment. That was because the dark green flames were blooming like fireworks, falling bit by bit. And these falling sparks were like maggots that would not be extinguished. No matter how they struggled, they could not get rid of the flames that had touched their bodies. With a loud bang they were burned to ashes. It was the same for the great sage. In front of the flames, the great sage was as powerless as an ant. In the sky, the god of Chef's challenge laughed wildly. The wheel of law was surrounded by the flames of law. That made the power of this move even more terrible. On the ground, everyone began to flee frantically. They ran away in panic, looking very embarrassed. If they did not run away, they would likely be touched by the flames, and when that happened, they would not be far from death. Hades' era unleashed his nether energy to block many of the flames. Bufang boy, let's go. Although this god of Chef's challenge is strong, I don't think he can defeat the Lord Go. Era said, looking at Bufang. Hades Tenzang landed beside Bufang. His body glowed with a metallic luster, and he nodded solemnly. Once touched by the flames, even his metallic body would be vaporized. However, out of everyone's expectations, Bufang shook his head, staring at the god of Chef's challenge in the sky with bright eyes. You guys go first. Take you and leave this place. Go back to Acheron City. I have something important to do. Bufang said. However, his words made Hades' era, Hades Tenzang, and the others slightly stunned. What else can you do here? The Lord Go is here. Let's go back. Hades' era said, puzzled. However, Bufang was very stubborn. He just shook his head. You held Little Hu in her arms, looked at Bufang, pursed her lips, and called Hades' era and Hades Tenzang to leave. She felt that Bufang must have his own purpose for staying. Hades Tenzang was not stupid. He seemed to understand something. He looked at Bufang. Bufang's eyes were bright, and he seemed to be plotting something. Bufang followed his gaze. He saw the god of Chef's challenge in the sky. Then, Hades Tenzang's heart was filled with a storm. No way. Was Owner Bu's goal the god of Chef's challenge? Did Owner Bu have an idea for a god? That was a god, a lofty god who had comprehended the laws of heaven and earth. Taking a deep breath, Hades Tenzang didn't say anything. The dark green flame of law that filled the sky became more and more terrifying. The netherworld ship rose into the sky and left with you and the others. Then there were only 4 people left in this void. Bufang, Di Ting, the Lord Go, and the god of Chef's challenge. Di Ting was a little puzzled. Why didn't Bufang leave? He was about to say something, but his eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. Owner Bu. What is he doing? Is he crazy? Di Ting sucked in a cold breath. He saw Bufang move. His feet stepped on the void. As soon as he did, the void cracked. Owner Bu grabbed a steaming biscuit and stuffed it into his mouth. His body turned into a stream of light and soared into the sky, rushing toward the god of Chef's challenge. What was he doing? Was he a moth flying into a flame? Di Ting couldn't believe it. He didn't expect that Owner Bu would not run away but go to his death. That was the god of Chef's challenge, a god. It wasn't just Di Ting. Even Lord Go and the god of Chef's challenge, who were fighting, noticed Bufang. Lord Dog was taken aback and his brows furrowed. Bufang boy. Is he going to do something again? The god of Chef's challenge's eyes were sharp. He looked disdainfully at Bufang. If the black dog, who had comprehended the law of time, made him a little afraid, Bufang, who was not even a god, could not arouse his interest at all. If it weren't for the mysterious power in Bufang, the god of Chef's challenge wouldn't even look at Bufang. There was only an insurmountable gap between mortals and gods. It was the same for the great sage. Buzz. Bufang's figure hovered in midair. He put a fortune flatbread in his mouth. Immediately, fortune energy spread. Lord Go. That guy. Leave me a breath. I'll make you sweet and sour true dragon ribs when I get back. Bufang shouted from the void. In the sky, Lord Go's eyes lit up. Is that true? Sweet and sour true dragon ribs. Lord Go's dog mouth was almost drooling, and his eyes shone brightly. Of course. Bufang chuckled. The next moment, his mind whispered in his spirit sea. White tiger. As his voice rang out, Bufang shot into the sky like a cannonball. His hair underwent a monstrous change. Buzz, in the blink of an eye, his black hair turned white. 3,000 white hairs spread across the sky. His sword-like eyes burst out with sharp light. Thousands of streams of energy swirled behind him, turning into a colorful tiger. The tiger roared. The god of chef's challenge is just trash. White-haired Bufang said disdainfully and proudly. You're courting death. The god of chef's challenge flew into a rage. How dare a mere mortal look down on him like this? Rumble. The wheel of law wrapped in the fire of law turned around and shot toward Bufang, trying to kill Bufang. At this moment Lord Go moved. He disappeared from where he was as if he had teleported. When he reappeared, he was in front of the god of chef's challenge. Rumble. His body changed abruptly. His chubby figure became slender in an instant, and he was surrounded by earth prison flames and bursting with blood-colored light. Time froze in an instant. The god of chef's challenge's pupils constricted. Then, his body exploded. In his line of sight, the earth prison dog's figure became illusory. His body suffered countless attacks. It was constantly being destroyed and dimmed, being destroyed and dimmed. The last move. The golden dog paw smashed down. Like a cannonball, the god of chef's challenge was knocked down from the sky and smashed hard on the ground. The whole land of the Nether Chef clan had turned into an abyssal ruin. In the sky, Lord Go's whole body was burning with earth prison flames and white smoke. The divine power was not a small burden for him. Using it twice was already his limit. However, as Bufang had said, the god of chef's challenge had been beaten to the brink of death. The clone of his divine sense was illusory. It was as if it would be destroyed at any moment. A biguang was moving in the void, as if it had turned into a bolt of white lightning. Under the abyss, the clone of the god of chef's challenge rose to his feet and roared. That dog actually spared his life. Was it so that the chef could kill the god? Even if his divine sense avatar only had one breath left, he was still a god. A god that could not be offended. What right does a mere chef have to slaughter a god? White-haired Bufang dodged the wheel of law. His gaze was indifferent and determined. Like a cannonball, it shot straight down from the sky. Then, he rushed toward the god of chef's challenge, who stood up and roared in the starry sky. Lord Go and Diding hovered in the void, watching quietly. Although they found this scene unbelievable, however, there was a strange feeling in his heart. Fallen to the mortal world, but still a god. Gods could not be insulted. You chef, die. The god of chef's challenge's face was ferocious as he raised his palm. The palm, which seemed to illuminate the starry sky, was going to kill this mortal who insulted a god. White-haired Bufang did not dodge. He raised a hand. The invisible divine flame was burning in his palm. It twisted the void. Then, he slapped down. Under the serious gazes of Diding and Lord Go, his palm collided with the god of chef's challenge's palm. Chapter 1402. Could a mortal kill a god? No one had ever done that before. Perhaps in the distant divine dynasty there were some geniuses who could do it. Of course, the god of chef's challenge didn't think that the chef in front of him could kill a god. In a remote great world, it was not easy to give birth to a god who comprehended the supreme law of the universe. How difficult would it be to give birth to a mortal who could kill a god? Even though he was already very weak after being beaten by the black dog. Even so, he was not someone a mortal could offend. A god was a god. He represented the law of the world. Die. The god of Chef's challenge roared. His palm collided with Bufang, who was descending from the sky. A loud explosion rang out. Di Ting's and Lord Go's eyes shrank. In the sky, the netherworld ship reappeared. Yu and the others, who had returned, stood on the ship and looked incredulously at the ruins shrouded in green flames. They never thought that owner Bu would really choose to do something so terrible. He actually dared to fight a god head-on. Was he crazy? The green flames soared into the sky, enveloping the whole ruins as if it had turned into a land of death, a land where no living creature could enter. Di Ting took a deep breath. He was silent. In his opinion, Bufang would not be able to survive in this abyss of green flames that was like a sea of fire. He would be burned to ashes by the flames. That was the law of fire, a flame that contained the power of the law. It was the law of fire comprehended by the god of Chef's challenge. Who could survive the burning of the power of the law? Even Di Ting was not sure that he could survive. Lord Go narrowed his eyes as if he wanted to see through the sea of fire. He didn't think that Bufang would be so stupid. When Bufang sent him a voice transmission, he couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. It meant that the god of Chef's challenge definitely had something that excited Bufang. What could it be? What would happen to Bufang after he obtained it? In the sea of fire, his white hair fluttered in the wind. The scorching heat swept over. However, Bufang's body was covered with the invisible divine flame, so the fire of law couldn't burn him. The weak god of Chef's challenge was pressed to the ground by white-haired Bufang. White Tiger's lips curled up. He actually began to fight with the god of Chef's challenge. The sound of collisions and rumbles rang out incessantly, causing a series of explosions. However, after eating the fortune flatbread and being possessed by the artifact spirit, Bufang's battle prowess was no weaker than that of a demigod. The weak god of Chef's challenge might not be much stronger than a demigod now. After being bombarded by the Lord Go's divine ability, he was basically on the verge of death. Boom! White-haired Bufang's fist was covered with invisible divine fire. Every punch landed on flesh. It hit the god of Chef's challenge in the face, causing his face to twist strangely. Of course, Bufang couldn't blow up the god of Chef's challenge's head with one punch like the Lord Go, but Bufang wasn't in a hurry. Just like that, he would slowly kill the god of Chef's challenge. The god of Chef's challenge couldn't believe that this mortal could survive the divine fire. What kind of trick was this? But as a god, he couldn't be afraid of a mortal. If Bufang wanted to fight, he would fight. Fists collided with fists, and power rumbled. The battle seemed to have turned into a hand-to-hand fight. Bufang and the god of Chef's challenge fought at the bottom of the abyss. No one saw this battle. However, the intensity of the battle was enough to make one's heart tremble. One punch after another. The fists containing the divine fire smashed the god of Chef's challenge in the face. With each attack, the god's aura was slightly destroyed. After a long time, the god of Chef's challenge finally couldn't hold on any longer. He fell to the ground with a crash. Bufang stood where he was, gasping for breath. White-haired Bufang's white hair receded, and the white tiger artifact spirit returned to his spirit sea. Bufang took a deep breath and slowly walked in front of the god of Chef's challenge. The guy in front of him was the divine sense clone of the god of Chef's challenge. In fact, he could be regarded as half of the god of Chef's challenge. However, even if it was a divine sense avatar, it still contained the complete power of laws. And this power of the law was what Bufang needed. Step by step, he walked in front of the god of Chef's challenge, who fell to the ground and couldn't move. Looking down from above, it gave off the feeling of looking down from a high position. Looking at a god like this could satisfy one's vanity. Of course, this kind of useless vanity didn't exist for Bufang. He raised his hand. On his palm, an invisible divine fire began to burn. The god of Chef's challenge couldn't see the divine fire, nor could his divine sense. This was the characteristic of the divine fire, but the temperature of the divine fire was real. Mortal! You can't kill me. You can't afford the price of killing a god. The god of Chef's challenge, lying on the ground, looked coldly at Bufang. At this moment, he calmed down. If you kill me, my divine sense clone will turn into a curse and linger in your spirit sea forever. You will never be able to make any progress in this life, and you will be immortal forever. The god of Chef's challenge grinned and seemed to curse. It was a curse that made people tremble like a nightmare. It was very vicious. However, Bufang was unmoved. He flicked his finger. The invisible divine fire was flicked out by Bufang. It fell on the god of Chef's challenge's body, and a scorching heat erupted. The god of Chef's challenge's eyes widened. He looked at his chest, where a hole had been burned. How dare you! The god of Chef's challenge roared. However, Bufang's face was expressionless. If the god of Chef's challenge hadn't coveted his opportunity, he wouldn't have turned around and come back, and he wouldn't have fallen into this situation. All this was the god of Chef's challenge's clone's fault. Wouldn't it be unfair to him if he didn't take the head that came from 1,000 miles away? Sizzle! The god of Chef's challenge was furious. Was he really going to become a god who died at the hands of a mortal? Even if it was just a clone of a god, he wouldn't allow himself to die in such a humiliating way. Law runes actually appeared on the incinerated wounds. Bufang's eyes lit up when he saw the rune of law. The divine fire attached itself to it as if it had encountered something it desired the most. Bufang could feel the desire and excitement emanating from it. Sizzle, as the invisible divine fire attached itself to it, the god of Chef's challenge was horrified to find that the runes on his chest began to collapse, disintegrate, and be plundered. Plundering the law? How crazy was that? The god of Chef's challenge, finally understood why Bufang had asked the black dog to keep him alive. He was going to plunder the power of law in his body. I can't believe this mortal is so crazy. Is he so sure that I, a god, don't have the strength to resist? You're playing with fire, the god of Chef's challenge said coldly. Although he didn't know how Bufang absorbed his power of law, he couldn't allow it to happen. Playing with fire? Congratulations, you've guessed it right. Bufang seemed a little surprised. The god of Chef's challenge sneered. Go ahead and absorb it. Sooner or later, you'll explode. How can a mortal control the power of a god? The god of Chef's challenge laughed. Bufang's face was indifferent, and he didn't care at all. Since you've asked me to do so, I'll absorb it boldly, Bufang said. As soon as he said that, his fingers moved. 5 more invisible divine flames shot out. Suddenly, the god of Chef's challenge, who had fallen powerlessly on the ground, jerked his head up. His eyes widened, looking extremely terrifying. You want to kill a god? You'll have to pay the price. Feel the curse from a god. The god of Chef's challenge roared. As soon as he said that, the whole sea of fire was boiling. Then, a rumble rang out. The god of Chef's challenge's eyes burst with golden light. Buzz, the next moment, the golden light shot straight toward Bufang. In a flash, it went into Bufang's body. Bufang furrowed his brows, surprised and doubtful. In his spirit sea, monstrous waves rolled out. A beam of golden light rushed into the spirit sea, turning into a stream of light and speeding toward the center. Buzz, the golden light faded. It had turned into the golden body of the god of Chef's challenge. His body looked ferocious and terrifying. This was the curse of the god of Chef's challenge. The power that affected the spirit sea was the wisp of divine sense of the god of Chef's challenge's clone. The power of divine sense was so powerful that it could crush divine will. Bufang was just a mortal. He hadn't condensed his divine sense yet, so the god of Chef's challenge wasn't afraid of him. The god of Chef's challenge didn't expect that he could invade Bufang's spirit sea so easily. Buzz, like a hidden dragon, it sped away. Outside his body, Bufang furrowed his brows. He seemed to feel the divine sense that had entered his body. That divine sense should be the god of Chef's challenges. Did it run into his spirit sea? Why was it so eager to die? Bufang's face was very strange. His spirit sea was the strongest place. Since the divine sense of the god of Chef's challenge had broken into it, he didn't need to do anything. So, Bufang began to lock his attention on the divine flame in front of him. The power of devouring law was a means to make the power of the divine flame stronger. Of course, Bufang wouldn't give up the power of law in front of him. As it devoured, the body of the god of Chef's challenge began to shrivel. Gradually, it lost its essence. The runes of law in it were dismantled, turned into a silver dragon, and fused into the divine flame. The divine flame burned fiercely, and its originally invisible appearance slowly revealed its color. It turned silver. The silver flame was burning quietly, and the void around it seemed to be shattering. The power of the divine flame was unparalleled. Bufang felt that the power of this divine flame was enough to threaten a god. After all, it contained the power of two laws: the law of Chef's challenge and the law of flame. Although these laws didn't belong to him and he couldn't control them, they had improved the power of the divine flame a lot. Finally, the body of the god of Chef's challenge dissipated completely. Then, it disappeared. The power of law was completely absorbed by it. The silver flame was very bright, burning quietly. His mind flickered. The silver flame suddenly changed and turned into a silver wheel. It was somewhat similar to the wheel of law of the god of Chef's challenge. However, it was condensed of silver flame, so its temperature was extremely high, and it had the power to burn. He flicked his finger. The silver wheel buzzed and spun rapidly. Then it shot out. It began to spin and fly around Bufang. Soon, it turned into a monstrous tornado. As the silver wheel absorbed the dark green flame that pervaded the abyss, it quickly dispersed. In the sky, Lord Go, Di Ting, Yu, and the others finally saw Bufang's appearance. They didn't expect that Bufang was still alive. That gave them pause. They fell one after another. The silver wheel hovered in Bufang's hand and turned into a burning silver flame. Then, it gradually became transparent again and lost its color. The invisible divine flame could still be invisible. Lord Go landed with a suspicious look on his face and looked at Bufang. "Where's the god of Chef's challenge? Did he run away?" Lord Go asked doubtfully. Di Ting was also puzzled. Everyone looked around as if trying to find out where the god of Chef's challenge was. A god couldn't just disappear into thin air, could he? As for Bufang killing a god, they didn't quite believe it. After all, he was a god. How could he kill a god just like that? Bufang came to his senses from the joy of absorbing the power of the law. When he heard the question, he froze. Where is the god of Chef's challenge? Only then did Bufang remember that the god of Chef's challenge had run into his spirit sea. He wondered what had happened to that guy now. As for the crowd's doubts, Bufang, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth and pointed at his head. The god of Chef's challenge ran into my spirit sea. He's very naughty. He ran into my spirit sea? Bufang's voice rang out. The expressions of Lord Go and Di Ting changed. A god's divine sense broke into the spirit sea? He was afraid that Bufang would become a fool. Chapter 1403. The spirit sea was the most important place for a person. When one reached a higher level, the cultivation of the fleshly body had reached its limit and could not continue to break through. However, the cultivation of the spirit was endless. The exploration of the spirit sea was like the vast starry sky, unfathomable. Once the spirit sea was damaged, a person would basically be crippled. Therefore, when the crowd learned that the god of Chef's challenge had entered Bufang's spirit sea, they were all shocked. This kind of operation was definitely fatal. For him, if a god ran into his spirit sea, how could he survive? Unless there was a god in Bufang's spirit sea as well. Of course, how could such a thing exist? That was why Di Ting looked at Bufang with sympathy in his eyes. This kind of sympathy made Bufang feel a little strange. His spirit sank into the spirit sea. Immediately, a whirlpool swept out and the rumbling waves surged. Bufang floated over with his hands clasped behind his back. His pace was neither fast nor slow. Above the spirit sea, the god of cooking's menu was flipping. There was still a drop of divine power left on it, flashing with a golden luster. It was like the blazing sun in the sky, overshadowing everything. The divine will phantom spirit sat cross-legged on the god of cooking's menu. At this moment, its eyes were glowing brightly as it stared in a certain direction. Bufang walked with his hands clasped behind his back. Before long, he came to the divine will phantom spirit's side and looked in the direction it was pointing at. Then, he saw the divine will of the god of Chef's Challenge. The divine will of the god of Chef's Challenge floated in midair. It glowed with a silver luster like a sharp sword that could cut everything. At this moment, the divine will of the god of Chef's Challenge was facing the four artifact spirits: the golden divine dragon, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, and the black turtle. The four of them sat in four directions of the spirit sea, looking down at the silver divine will of the god of Chef's Challenge. Below them was the boundless spirit sea. The god of Chef's Challenge was shocked. The horror in his heart could no longer be described with words. He looked around. This was the first time he had seen such a vast spirit sea. Even his own spirit sea was not so big. Was this the spirit sea of a mortal? Was it a joke? There were also the four terrible divine beasts sitting in four directions: divine dragon, vermilion bird, black tortoise, white tiger. They were looking at him with faint smiles, which made the god of Chef's Challenge feel a little flustered. He had never imagined that this mortal's spiritual sea would actually look like this. "Oh, another friend has come." The divine gold dragon's mocking voice resounded. The god of Chef's Challenge jerked his head over and saw the golden dragon smiling at him. The smile of a dragon. The vermilion bird flapped its wings and feathers fluttered in the air. This is divine sense, the divine sense of a god. But even a god would need a lot of courage to invade little host's spirit sea. Vermilion bird said. Her voice was very gentle, like a spring breeze. The black tortoise closed his eyes and rested, not saying a word. White tiger snorted proudly and was too lazy to speak. Just now, he had been possessed by the white tiger and abused the god of Chef's Challenge. White tiger couldn't be bothered to talk to a defeated opponent. They were not on the same level, so there was no need for any interaction. The vermilion bird's words woke the god of Chef's Challenge. "That's right, I'm a god. What am I afraid of? I'm just a mortal with a strange spirit sea. Can I ascend to heaven?" At the thought of that, the god of Chef's Challenge's confidence rose. He opened his mouth and let out a soft whistle. The aura on his body continued to rise, and very quickly, it reached an extremely terrifying level. This was the pressure of a god. This spirit sea is very good. If I take it for myself, maybe I can set foot on a wider world. The god of Chef's Challenge's eyes were full of desire. He stared at the four artifact spirit. "All of you, submit to me." His voice rang out. A loud bang rang out. The god of Chef's Challenge shot out like a cannonball. The next moment, he froze. A golden dragon's claw grabbed his body, and a terrible force was squeezing him violently. "You think very highly of yourself," the divine gold dragon said playfully. "Do you know who you're talking to?" The divine gold dragon raised a claw and flicked the god of Chef's Challenge on the head. "You're talking to the noble Nicholas, the handsome dragon. Do you know that?" The god of Chef's Challenge was a little confused. What dragon? He didn't seem to understand why these guys weren't afraid of his divine might. The divine gold dragon chattered. With every sentence, he flicked the god of Chef's Challenge's head. With every flick, the god of Chef's Challenge's head became red and swollen. After a long time, the god of Chef's Challenge couldn't stand it anymore. How could he bear this kind of humiliation? "Let go of me!" The god of Chef's Challenge's eyes were blazing. He roared and tried to break free. However, he really managed to break free from it. As soon as he broke free from the dragon's claw, he turned into a beam of silver light and shot into the distance. Unfortunately, he had just broken free. However, he was caught by the five-clawed golden dragon again. This handsome dragon remembers that the little kid who trespassed into the little host's spirit sea last time shivered under this handsome dragon's dragon might. You're not bad. You can still resist. However, it's interesting to resist. This handsome dragon will have a sense of accomplishment when I conquer you. No one can save you even if you shout yourself hoarse. The divine gold dragon laughed. The god of chef's challenge's face darkened. Was he being molested? Was he being molested by a stupid dragon? Bufang hovered around the god of chef's divine will. When he saw this, his face became very strange. Sure enough, with the 4 artifact spirits, his spirit sea was impregnable. Even the divine sense of a god couldn't cause any damage to his spirit sea. He was afraid that the god of chef's challenge would feel real despair. Boom! A terrible aura suddenly surged out. The god of chef's challenge's divine sense broke free and soared into the sky. He felt that he had to escape. He thought that by breaking into this mortal's spirit sea, he could occupy this mortal's body. Just like how he had occupied Zhuang's body. But now, it seemed that he was dreaming. The gap between Zhuang's spirit sea and Bufang's was like heaven and earth. Buzz, he turned into a beam of silver light. The god of chef's challenge couldn't wait to fly out of the spirit sea. Suddenly, as soon as he turned, he saw Bufang. His eyes lit up. It was Bufang's consciousness. He finally found it. As long as he erased Bufang's consciousness, this spirit sea would belong to him. Boom! The void exploded. Waves rolled. The god of chef's challenge shot toward Bufang like a beam of light. Bufang hovered over the god of cooking's menu, watching indifferently. In his spirit sea, the god of chef's challenge still dared to have evil thoughts. Facing the god of chef's challenge, who was rushing toward him crazily, Bufang slowly raised his palm. In the distance, the golden divine dragon, the vermilion bird, and the others watched with faint smiles. Die! The god of chef's challenge shot out wildly, trying to destroy Bufang's consciousness. Unfortunately, while his dreams were beautiful, reality gave him a rude awakening. The divine will phantom next to Bufang opened its eyes. Golden light swirled. The fluctuation of its divine will spread in an instant. It rushed toward the god of chef's challenge. Divine will? Ridiculous! He was the divine will of a god. How could he be afraid of a mere divine will? The god of chef's challenge sneered. However, his smile soon froze on his face. His divine will surged over. The body of the god of chef's challenge froze. Under the impact of this divine will, his divine will shattered inch by inch. This damn thing! The god of chef's challenge flew into a rage. However, something even more frightening happened. That book, yes, the divine will phantom was sitting on the book. There was a drop of golden liquid on it. The aura that made him yearn for it came from that drop of golden liquid. This was the mysterious power. However, he had no chance to obtain this power. The god of cooking's menu shook. A beam of light shot out of it. That beam of light sped over and hit the divine will of the god of chef's challenge. Boom! The divine will of the god of chef's challenge let out a miserable howl as it shattered inch by inch. Damn it! What kind of power is this? The god of chef's challenge was terrified. He watched as his body began to collapse, gradually turning into 4 rays of golden light. Bufang watched in amazement. The god of cooking's menu had this kind of attack? The disintegrating divine will of the god of chef's challenge slowly turned into 4 beams of golden light. When the golden light faded, it turned into 4 steaming golden buns, floating in Bufang's spirit sea. Bufang froze. Buns? The divine will of the god of chef's challenge was made into buns? That was a little miserable. Hey, guys, there's delicious food. The moment the golden divine dragon saw the buns, He opened his mouth and roared. It was a roar of excitement that he couldn't suppress. The next moment, his figure dashed out at high speed. He turned into a beam of golden light, opened his mouth, and swallowed the buns with 100% accuracy. The proud white tiger was no longer arrogant. With a roar, he sped over. Holding the golden buns in his mouth, he fled. The vermilion bird and the sleeping black turtle could not stay calm. It was as if the golden buns were very precious. Before long, to Bufang's astonishment, the 4 artifact spirits ate the buns made of the god of Chef's Challenge's divine will. After the 4 artifact spirits finished eating, they even burped in satisfaction. Nutritious, nutritious. These divine will buns are really nutritious. How long has it been? Finally, I can taste the taste of buns. The golden divine dragon cried tears of joy, and bean-sized tears rolled down his face. Bufang was speechless. This guy really knew how to add drama to himself. Those are buns made of divine will. With the help of the god of cooking's menu, they are very nutritious for us. Originally, divine will can't be eaten, but after being processed by the god of cooking's menu, they became edible. After eating them, our strength will be stronger, the black turtle explained to Bufang. After that, the 4 artifact spirits closed their eyes, as if digesting the buns. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth, feeling sorry for the god of Chef's Challenge for a second. Then, he turned and left the Spirit Sea. The god of Chef's Challenge had been dealt with, and the crisis in the Spirit Sea, the harassment had been quelled. Naturally, Bufang didn't need to worry anymore. With a thought, Bufang returned to his body. Then, he met the wide eyes of Lord Go and the others. "How is it?" Lord Go asked, his voice full of concern. The Harken also craned its neck, seemingly taking pleasure in the other's misfortune. Bufang blinked. "What do you mean?" Bufang was a little confused. "The divine will of the god of Chef's Challenge broke into your Spirit Sea. Didn't that guy destroy it?" Di Ting said eagerly. He seemed to be looking forward to Bufang's crazy look. Unfortunately, Di Ting didn't know how miserable the god of Chef's Challenge was in Bufang's Spirit Sea. The divine sense of a dignified god was actually refined into 4 steamed buns. They were swallowed one by one. If the divine will of the god of Chef's Challenge knew this, he would vomit blood in anger. Unfortunately, the god of Chef's Challenge could only feel a stabbing pain in his spirit and a weak divine will. He didn't know the miserable fate of his divine will. Oh, the god of Chef's Challenge turned into buns. He swallowed them one by one. Bufang said. As soon as he said that, everyone was stunned. Divine will turned into buns? Don't think you can talk nonsense just because you are a chef. Do you really think we are uncultured? The corner of Bufang's mouth curved upward slightly. It's a fact. My Spirit Sea is not a place that ordinary people can enter at will. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang looked at the dissipating haze. Slowly, he raised his hand. An invisible divine flame was burning on his finger. The divine flame tore down. It burned a rift in the void. Then, he stepped into it and headed for Acheron City. Bufang had an intuition that if he mastered the invisible divine flame, which had devoured the power of 2 laws, he might really be able to kill a god. In the Heaven Chief realm, the branches of the Heaven Tree slowly gathered, then condensed into a vague figure. The figure hovered above the branches, looking into the distance with a deep look in his eyes. Suddenly, the trunk and leaves of the Heaven Tree kept shaking, as if they were afraid of something. Buzz, a silhouette dashed over at high speed. Realm Lord Dit flew over from the Heaven Chief realm. He felt the fear from the Heaven Tree, so he came out to have a look. He hovered beside the figure formed by the branches, looking at him in confusion. Realm Lord Dit, who was topless, flicked his golden hair and asked, "What's wrong?" Crack, crack, the figure formed by the branches slowly turned to look at Realm Lord Dit, a look of horror in his eyes. This deeply shocked Realm Lord Dit. It was the first time he had seen the heaven tree show such an emotion. The heaven tree kept swaying, its voice hoarse. Fear swallowed him like a huge wave. That man is back! Chapter 1404. Earth Prison, Acheron City, Acheron Little Restaurant. A hole slowly appeared in the void like a piece of paper that was being burned. Bufang walked out of it, his vermilion robe fluttering in the wind. As soon as he stepped on the solid ground of the restaurant, Bufang felt relaxed both physically and mentally. This time, although the Lord Go had helped the god of chef's challenge, in the end, it was Bufang himself who devoured the power of law in the god of chef's challenge. For Bufang, it was a very dangerous experience. Just as Di Ting had said, even if the god of chef's challenge only had one breath left, he was still a god, a supreme and incomparably powerful god. He was not someone ordinary people could deal with. If he asked the Lord Go to keep the god of chef's challenge alive and deal with him himself, if he couldn't defeat him, it would be a real disaster. Fortunately, Bufang completed everything according to plan. The divine flame had also completely devoured the power of the two laws. It was one more law power than what he had expected. Standing outside the restaurant, Bufang clasped his hands behind his back, raised his hand and held out his index finger. A silver radiance burst forth from his index finger. It was a silver flame, which looked like a quiet lotus flower, slowly drifting over it. It was late at night. Above the dark sky, there was only a moon hanging in the sky, shining brightly. Acheron City was very lively. Even in the middle of the night, it still looked like a city that never slept. The whole city was filled with the heat of burning charcoal and the aroma of food. Night was the busiest time in Acheron City. This situation had been going on for 10 years, and there was a trend of forming a cultural atmosphere. In Acheron City, the day belonged to a restaurant, and the night belonged to tens of thousands of stalls. The divine flame was extinguished. Bufang looked back at Acheron City, exhaled softly, and stepped into the restaurant. He opened the door. Bufang pulled out a chair and sat in front of the restaurant. At night, Bufang was not open for business, but that did not stop him from enjoying the cool air. Lord Go, the Harkin, Hades Era, and the others also returned. They all looked at Bufang with a strange expression. Lord Go was fine. He returned to the path understanding tree and slept soundly. The Harkin had transformed into a little boy, and its expression was extremely strange. When the god of chef's challenge's divine sense went into Bufang's mind, he didn't suppress Bufang. Instead, he made Bufang into a divine sense bun. Who knew what the divine sense bun was? However, on second thought, Truth Listener came to a realization. After all, Bufang had obtained that man's inheritance. As a follower of that man, the Harkin was well aware of just how terrifying that man could be. Now that he thought about it, it made sense that Bufang was extraordinary. You stood behind Bufang with little Hu in her arms. The night breeze blew slowly, making their hair flutter. After enjoying the cool air for a while, Bufang lay down on a chair and took a nap. A few moments later, he opened his eyes and sorted out what he had obtained. He had gained a lot from this trip to Nether Prison. Not only had he condensed the divine flame, but he had also made it devour the power of two laws. Although he couldn't control the power of these two laws, it was still the power of laws, something that ordinary people wouldn't even dare to imagine. Bufang was pondering. What exactly is the power of law? He thought of the reward for his advancement, which was a fruit of law. In addition to the fragment of the god of cooking set, the fruit of law was the only reward left. At first, Bufang did not pay too much attention to this fruit, but now it seemed that this fruit was not ordinary. With a thought in his mind slowly, a bright light emerged over Bufang's palm. Then, energy began to gather. The violent energy seemed to crush the void. A moment later, a 7-colored fruit emerged in Bufang's hand. It looked a little like a tomato, but its color was colorful. Drops of juice swirled in it like an exquisite work of art. This was the fruit of law. In the restaurant, under the path understanding tree, Lord Go opened his eyes and looked over in confusion. Di Ting, on the other hand, widened his eyes and looked incredulously at the fruit of law in Bu Fang's hand. He could feel the great temptation emanating from the seven-colored fruit in Bu Fang's hand, and it was so tempting that he could not extricate himself from it. He had a feeling that, with his strength as a god, if he ate this fruit, his strength might rise to a higher level. That was very unusual. So, he longed for this fruit very much, and he even felt a little greedy. This greed was directed at this fruit. He wanted to take it for himself. Bu Fang held the fruit and glanced indifferently at Di Ting. The look in his eyes made Di Ting shudder. Then, he did not dare to make any unnecessary movement. Di Ting broke out in a cold sweat. He was a prisoner now, and yet he still dared to have such thoughts. Without Bu Fang, that earth prison dog could slap him to death with one paw. Di Ting knew what he was thinking. Although earth prison dog was sleeping, its mastery of the law of time had become more and more mature. Now, he was even less of a match for it. After all, even the god of Chef's challenge, who had comprehended multiple laws, was no match for it. What could a god like him, who had comprehended an ordinary law, do? In the face of Bu Fang's gaze, Di Ting could only smile awkwardly. Bu Fang withdrew his gaze, too lazy to pay attention to him. He glanced at the fruit of law in his hand. Then, he opened his mouth and took a bite of it. Slurp! The sweet and sour fruit flesh entered his mouth. It melted in Bu Fang's mouth, turned into a stream of light, and kept spreading. Buzz, a seven-colored light burst out of it. Bu Fang's expression changed as he sat in the chair. Rumble! Bu Fang's eyes glowed with a seven-colored light. The vermilion robe fluttered even though there was no wind. His mind seemed to be pulled by a supreme force, and in an instant it crossed millions of miles. It was as if it was flowing in the river of time and space. A rumbling sound rang out. Bu Fang's divine will came to a halt. Everything that appeared in front of him was actually a boundless sea of seven colors. However, there were all sorts of ribbons fluttering in the rainbow ocean. These ribbons were constantly changing their appearance. Sometimes they were beasts, sometimes they were humans, sometimes they were flowers and grass, and sometimes they were streams. Where is this? Bu Fang took a deep breath. He found everything in front of him incredible. His divine will was about to sink into his spirit sea. However, he was shocked to find that his spirit sea seemed to be isolated from his divine will. He could not contact the four artifact spirits, nor could he sense his mental force vortex. The only thing he could sense was the god of cooking's menu, which was blooming with a dazzling golden light. The place where the host is comprehending is the chaotic sea of laws, which is the place where the laws are born. The system's serious voice rang out. It explained everything to Bu Fang. Upon hearing the familiar voice, Bu Fang felt relieved. At this moment, he began to look around. The sea of laws, since I've eaten the fruit of law, am I going to comprehend the laws? Bu Fang narrowed his eyes. If that was the case, it would be great. Suddenly, Bu Fang's heart skipped a beat. To become a demigod, one needed to comprehend the laws. However, there was no difference between a demigod and the great sage. Therefore, if Bu Fang wanted to become a demigod, he might need to comprehend the laws. He did not need to achieve a high turnover. After figuring this out, Bu Fang felt a little excited. If he could become a demigod, Bu Fang felt that his cooking skills might improve even more. After all, a demigod had divine sense. In cooking, divine sense would certainly have an advantage over divine will. Perhaps this was why the fruit of law was so precious. It could help him comprehend the laws. After figuring this out, Bu Fang's mind flickered, and he began to swim in the sea of laws like a swallow. He felt the power of the laws that seemed to be real. There were thousands of laws. There were the law of fire, the law of water, the law of ice, the law of storm, and so on. There were thousands of laws of all kinds. The 3,000 laws were as vast as the sea, and it was not just for show. However, Bufang was not interested in ordinary laws. What Bufang wanted to comprehend was the supreme law of the universe, like the Lord Go. Perhaps only that kind of law could make him stronger. It would also make him more secure on the road to becoming a god of cooking. He kept drifting. The 3,000 laws were thrown to the back of his mind. Suddenly, Bufang's vision became empty. The shadows of 5 huge beasts emerged in front of him. Oh! Bufang's pupils constricted. Dragon, phoenix, black turtle, white tiger, Qilin. Bufang froze. Each of these 5 divine beasts exuded a majestic aura, which was much stronger than the power of laws he had seen before. The supreme laws of the universe. Bufang took a deep breath, and a little excitement came over his face. Were these the supreme laws of the universe comprehended by the Lord Go? Time, space, destruction, life, transmigration. The 5 supreme laws. Of course, these 5 supreme laws were publicly acknowledged. There might be others that had not been discovered, but these were the experiences of predecessors. Bufang's divine will surged and spread toward the 5 supreme laws. If he could comprehend even one of them, it would be of great benefit to him. A fruit of law gave him a chance to comprehend a law. For Bufang, this was a chance he could not miss. Bufang sat cross-legged in midair with his back to the 7-colored sea. Suddenly, thousands of runes of law emerged around Bufang. At the same time, the divine beasts condensed of the laws slowly approached him. Outside the great netherworld, in the boundless starry sky, in the calm void, there were stars circulating. Suddenly, the starry sky trembled, and a blue hole slowly emerged. Behind the hole, a warship slowly sailed out from it. It was a pitch-black warship made of some unknown material. There was a flag on it, and the word Divine Dynasty was written on it. This showed that the warship was sent by the Divine Dynasty. Rumble! The warship sped forward slowly. It did not look fast, but in the blink of an eye, it had crossed tens of thousands of miles and sped toward the netherworld. The view zoomed in. One could see that the warship was crowded with people. The auras of these people were extremely vigorous. This battleship was extremely huge. It was like a mountain that could crush the void. The door of the cabin opened. A group of people and horses slowly walked out. Their leader was a man who was even more beautiful than a woman. In front of this man, any peerless beauty would pale in comparison. The people around him looked at the man in awe. "Your Excellency, we've arrived at the great netherworld," a soldier said to the beautiful man in front of him. His black hair fluttered behind him, and his eyes were as charming as silk. His skin was like chaotic white jade, emitting a sparkling luster. The man clasped his hands behind him, and his body was perfect. No matter from which angle one looked at him, he was a perfect man. The man walked to the front of the ship. His eyes were calm. With his hands clasped behind him, his gaze seemed to cross tens of thousands of miles and fall on the huge great netherworld. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. That smile was so beautiful that it could topple a nation. "Netherworld, I'm back." As soon as his voice rang out, the warship immediately burst into streams of light, crossing the void and falling toward the great netherworld. In the Heaven Chief realm, the heaven tree shook violently, its branches fluttering in the wind. It lashed out at the void, shattering it into pieces. Swoosh! The branches swirled and turned into a figure. The figure looked at the vast sky and stared at the void. Realm Lord Dit landed on it and sucked in a cold breath. He could feel the uneasiness and fear of the heaven tree. He had never felt such a feeling before. "He's here," the figure gathered by the heaven tree said. As soon as his voice rang out, the sky above the heaven chief realm rumbled. A wave of darkness descended, covering everyone's sight. Realm Lord Dit's eyes shrank. He felt as though his heart was grabbed by an invisible hand, about to be crushed. The 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm in the sky, A pitch-black warship that spanned across the entire sky floated in the air. Boundless, terrifying energy burst forth from it, causing the space around the warship to collapse. Chapter 1405. Seven-colored light burst out. In Acheron City, it was as bright as day. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, attracted by this strange phenomenon. The seven-colored light was like a rainbow, making the dark night extremely bright. Everyone's eyes were attracted. Countless experts shot out and landed outside the restaurant. Looking at Bufang, who was sitting in front of the restaurant and shrouded in light, they were all shocked. What was going on? Countless people were bewildered, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. Lord Go, who was lying under the path understanding tree, slowly got up. He stared at Bufang, his eyes filled with surprise. Bufang boy, is he comprehending the law? Lord Go was bewildered, a little surprised. He had never thought that Bufang would start comprehending the law so soon. Hadn't Bufang just become a 9-revolution great sage not long ago? Wait, was it because of the seven-colored fruit just now? It was possible. As soon as the seven-colored fruit appeared, it gave Lord Go a strange feeling. It was the feeling of the law surging in it. Without a doubt, the seven-colored fruit must be related to the law. I can't believe there's such a good thing. Looks like I have to find a chance to ask Bufang boy for one. Lord Go licked his lips, thinking to himself. Di Ting was so jealous that he was about to go crazy. It was a great opportunity for Bufang to comprehend the power of law with just one fruit. To comprehend the law, one must go deep into the sea of law and communicate with it. Only when one was fated could one comprehend the law that belonged to them. This was a mutual process. Generally, it was the power of the appropriate laws that chose you. However, the process of entering the sea of law was enough to exhaust countless great sages. Owner Bu's luck is just too good. Di Ting scratched his ears and cheeks, his eyes bursting with crazy jealousy. Back then, in order to enter the sea of law, he almost died. In the end, he used the warship heart to comprehend the law. But what about Bufang? He entered the sea of law so easily, and it was no ordinary sea of law at that. Comparing humans to dogs would only anger the dogs to death. Truth Listener was so jealous that it almost went crazy. It even had a tendency to destroy all of this. However, a pitch-black claw landed on his shoulder, causing Truth Listener's body to turn cold. The jealousy immediately dissipated. Don't cause trouble. Lord Go stared intently at Harkin. The Harkin felt a chill run down its spine. With an awkward smile, the Harkin hurriedly waved its hand. Primal Sea of Laws. Bufang sat cross-legged in the void, surrounded by the 5 divine beasts. A terrifying aura spread out, and mysterious law runes constantly wrapped around Bufang's body. These 5 great laws represented the supreme laws of the universe. They were born from the essence of chaos, and were the laws that countless people dreamed of. At that moment, the 5 great laws revolved around Bufang. Bufang could only comprehend one law, but there were 5 here. Which law would be compatible with Bufang? This was something that Bufang did not know. However, the 5 great laws seemed to be competing with each other. Obviously, they all wanted to be comprehended by Bufang. Humans chose the laws, and the laws also chose humans. The roar of a dragon, the roar of a tiger, the cry of a phoenix, the roar of a tortoise, all kinds of sounds rang out. Suddenly, the dragon, phoenix, tiger, and black tortoise retreated. Only a huge, mountain-like Qilin was left, staring at Bufang with wide eyes. It hovered around Bufang's body. It seemed somewhat attached. Slowly it approached. Bufang's closed eyes snapped open, and it was as if a bolt of lightning had exploded in the void. Bufang's gaze collided with the Qilin's. It was as if sparks were flying. Sparks? The corner of Bufang's mouth suddenly twitched. The Qilin opened its mouth and gently exhaled. The next moment, an aura that seemed to make Bufang feel like a spring breeze enveloped his body. Finally, there seemed to be a strange feeling growing in Bufang's heart. Boom! The scene in front of him seemed to collapse, inch by inch. When everything became clear, Bufang found himself curled up in a chair, incomparably lazy. In the sky, the stars were blinking. Around him, there was a dense crowd of onlookers as far as the eye could see. Each and every one of them stared at Bufang with wide eyes. Today, in Acheron City, countless top experts from Earth Prison and Nether Prison had gathered. These experts were very clear about what had just happened. Owner Bu was actually comprehending the laws. Oh my God! How long had it been since this guy broke through to the great sage? This was the life of a cheat. Bufang cleared his throat and glanced doubtfully at the crowd around him. Being watched like this, Bufang felt a little embarrassed. "Disperse, all of you," Bufang said calmly, standing up. The next moment, the crowd burst into an uproar. "Owner Bu, are you comprehending the laws? How can you comprehend the laws so quickly? Did you cook a dish that can help you comprehend the laws?" "Owner Bu, I also want to comprehend the laws. I'm willing to devote myself to you." The crowd around him was talking noisily. Bufang, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth. Then, in front of the crowd's stunned eyes, he closed the door. Lord Go fixed his eyes on Bufang. He was also very curious about what law Bufang had comprehended in the Sea of Laws. Di Ting craned his neck curiously. It was impossible for him to be jealous, not in this lifetime. "Bufang boy, how do you feel?" Lord Go said. You, Hades Era, Hades Tenzang, and the others were all staring at Bufang. They were also curious. What law could Bufang comprehend in such a short time? What law? Bufang furrowed his brows. To be honest, he didn't know what law he had comprehended. After all, he had just looked at the Qilin in confusion. Moreover, what he comprehended was not a complete law. A half-god could not comprehend a complete law. Once a complete law was comprehended, he would be a god. Come, show it to me, Lord Go. Lord Go, I'm an existence who has comprehended the supreme law of the universe, so I can see what you have comprehended at a glance. Lord Go said. Bufang nodded. This piqued the curiosity of the people around him. A thought flashed in Bufang's mind. It sank into his heart. The next moment, a white rune of law slowly emerged in Bufang's palm. There were not many runes, but their aura was extremely majestic and powerful. The instant it spread out, the entire restaurant fell into a dead silence. Huh! Lord Go froze. Di Ting was stunned. You and the others were puzzled. This is, as a god, Di Ting could clearly feel how strong the power of law emanating from Bufang's palm was. The supreme law of the universe. Lord Go's face was very serious, and he sucked in a cold breath. He didn't expect Bufang to also comprehend a supreme law of the universe, and it was not an ordinary supreme law. It was the most mysterious and rare of the 5 supreme laws of the universe, the law of transmigration. The law of transmigration? Di Ting's mouth went dry. Jealous? Damn it, I'm so jealous. Since when did the supreme laws of the universe become so common? Not only did Earth Prison Dog comprehend it, but Bufang also comprehended it. How could this chef comprehend the law of transmigration? As a chef, shouldn't it be normal for him to comprehend the law of fire? Or perhaps the law of Chef's Challenge comprehended by the god of Chef's Challenge, the law of cooking, the law of knife path, and so on. A chef has nothing to do with the law of transmigration. What a lucky bastard. Di Ting's heart burned with jealousy. Even his tone became sour. The law of transmigration is mysterious and unfathomable. Even in the Divine Dynasty, I'm afraid only a few people have mastered it. Chef, if you really comprehend this law, I don't know whether it's a blessing or a curse, because no one can guide you on the path of cultivation. Di Ting said. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Lord Go slapped him on the head, causing him to fall to the ground with a thud. How can you say that? Lord Go gave Di Ting a sideways glance. He had never heard such sour words. No matter what, as long as it was a supreme law, once cultivated to the end, it would be extremely profound. It could penetrate heaven and earth. You're just a short-legged dog who comprehended the law of light. How can you comment on the supreme law of the universe? Lord Go said. Di Ting was speechless. The law of transmigration? Bufang froze. I'm actually comprehending the law of transmigration? Why? When he thought of the palpitation in his heart when the Qilin looked into his eyes, he felt that there must be something strange about the so-called transmigration. Buzz, as the power of the law emerged, Bufang's spirit sea underwent an earth-shattering change. The power of the law and his mind were instantly attracted into it. In the Heaven Chief realm Lord Dit stared blankly at it. The warship, which blotted out the sun, was like a god descending from the heavens. A supreme pressure spread out, forcing him to kneel. No. He was already on his knees. He could not resist this pressure that belonged to a god. On the warship, the sound of a bugle rang out. It was deafening, and his mind was shaken. Then, as Realm Lord Dit's pupils shrank, an unbelievably beautiful woman, no, a man, walked out of it. Step by step, he walked across the void. With each step, the runes of the law moved around his feet. A terrible pressure filled the world, as if he could destroy the entire Heaven Chief realm with just a thought. Who was he? Realm Lord Dit's heart pounded. He had never seen such a terrible existence. Even Earth Prison Dog, who had become a god, was weak in front of this unbelievably beautiful man. The Heaven Chief realm, the man clasped his hands behind his back. He wore a purple crown, a brocade robe, and a pair of dragon leather boots. He was slender and perfect, as if he was a masterpiece of God. Swish! The heaven tree swayed. Then, the branches condensed into a figure, staring at the handsome man. Heaven tree of myriad treasures! After so many years, you are still guarding this place, the man said faintly. His eyes were as gentle as water, and there seemed to be light bursting out of them. The branches of the heaven tree swayed, looking at the man. You're back. Unfortunately, you're not who you used to be, the heaven tree said. It said to the perfect man. The heaven tree's words made the man's eyes dim and disappointed. I know. I've lost everything, but it doesn't matter. There will always be a chance to come back, the man chuckled. He was in a good mood. I want to protect the Heaven Chief realm. I'm the god of Heaven Chief realm's guardian, the heaven tree said firmly. However, the man shook his head. The immortal cooking realm is no longer my world, but you are still mine, because you have my mark in you. You are my weapon, and that will never change in this life, Bufang said. The man said gently, his eyes surging with sincerity. The heaven tree opened its mouth as if it wanted to say something. However, it was shocked to find that the man had landed next to it. The man raised his hand. His fingers were sparkling, and light was moving on them. Then, he pointed at the figure on the heaven tree's branches. Crack! Crack! The heaven tree's branches disintegrated. Rumble! The entire Heaven Chief realm seemed to be shaking and collapsing. The realm overlord Dit's eyes almost popped out of his socket. The man in front of him, who was more beautiful than a woman, wanted to take away the Heaven Chief realm's heaven tree? He wanted to take away everything from the Heaven Chief realm. No way. Absolutely not. Realm Lord Di Tai withstood the great pressure and stood up. His eyes were filled with unyielding determination. You can't take away the heaven tree. The realm overlord Dit roared. The man's eyes turned, falling on the realm overlord Dit. His eyes were gentle and kind. The man flicked his finger, and the runes of law shot out. In an instant, they entered the realm overlord Dit's body. The realm overlord Dit's restless heart calmed down. His eyes were dull. The heaven tree's obsession is too heavy. He's just a weapon. Why give him such a huge responsibility? Returning to me is a kind of relief for him, the man said. A moment later, the heaven tree in the heaven chief realm shrank and eventually disappeared. It turned into a small, swaying tree in the man's hand. But without the heaven tree, the heaven chief realm will disappear completely. The realm overlord Dit said helplessly. Facing a god, he couldn't do anything. No, as long as I'm here, the heaven chief realm will prosper forever. I created the heaven chief realm. It's a world that belongs to chefs. The man smiled gently. The corners of his mouth rose, revealing a smile. That smile made the heaven and earth dim. The realm overlord Dit looked at him in a daze. His breath stagnated, as if he was immersed in that man's smile. After a long time, the realm overlord Dit came back to his senses. The warship in the sky had gone far away. The man held the heaven tree in his hand, his calm eyes gazing into the distance. My destination is Earth Prison. It's time to visit my juniors. Chapter 1406. In the Spirit Sea, Bufang hovered over it. Over his head, the god of cooking's menu glowed brilliantly as if it was floating, with energy constantly surging out of it. The 4 artifact spirits sat in 4 different directions of the Spirit Sea, causing monstrous waves to rise and fall. The divine will phantom spirits sat on top of the god of cooking's menu, surrounded by milky white runes of law. The fragments of these runes were somewhat scattered and messy. They lingered around the divine will phantom spirit as if they were nourishing it. From these milky white runes of law, Bufang could feel a surging, powerful aura, which seemed to be about to merge with his divine will at any time and make it undergo a qualitative leap. After comprehending the power of the law, this kind of power could significantly improve one's strength. At least, it was common knowledge that comprehending the power of the law would make one a demigod. And it was true. As Bufang comprehended the power of the law, Bufang's mental force kept changing, and the biggest change was in his divine will. His divine will was stained by the milky white halo and slowly became stagnant. At this moment, the somewhat illusory figure became real. It was like a real figure sitting cross-legged in midair. Sitting cross-legged in the void, his body was filled with oppressive energy. His mental force was hidden in his body, as if it would bring great destructive power once it burst out. Divine will. Bufang was pleasantly surprised as he looked at his divine will, which had become real and looked like a little person. The corners of his mouth curved upward. The divine will that he had been looking forward to for a long time was finally formed. Once it formed, it meant that Bufang had successfully stepped into the demigod realm and become a true demigod. Moreover, he was a demigod who had comprehended the law of transmigration. Although he hadn't comprehended the complete law yet, it was enough. With the formation of his divine will, Bufang's cooking skills would take a qualitative leap. On the path of the god of cooking, Bufang had taken another solid step. Buzz, on the god of cooking's menu, the power of the samsara law turned into a milky white vortex. The vortex spun slowly as it mobilized Bufang's mind power. The 4 artifact spirits were watching from afar, and they seemed to be a little shocked as well. Bufang withdrew from the Spirit Sea. He went into the kitchen and couldn't wait to feel the changes in his cooking. Bufang could feel that with the strengthening of his divine sense, Bufang's cooking skills had also improved. His fingers twitched. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand as if he was twirling it. His movements were as fast as lightning. The blade light suddenly shot down, and in an instant, all the ingredients were cut into pieces and scattered on the stove. Under the control of his divine sense, everything became very clear. The size of the cut, the gap between the cuts, etc., all became very orderly. With a flick of his finger, a silvery white flame appeared. The silver white flame burned quietly in Bufang's hand, emitting a scorching heat. The temperature was extremely high, as if it could burn everything in just a blink of an eye. It was a divine flame, with the runes of law dancing in it. No doubt it wasn't an ordinary flame. Anything in front of it would be burned to ashes. However, the black turtle constellation wok wouldn't. The scorching heat made the temperature of the wok soar. Bufang poured oil into the wok. He could feel the change in the temperature of the oil. Then, he put the ingredients into the wok and began to stir-fry. As soon as they were in the wok, the flame rose. The flame shot up from the wok, burning in the void, sizzling with steam. Then, he added the seasoning, stir-fried the side dishes. Everything seemed to be under Bufang's control. Everything became like a fish in water. Because of the enhancement of his mental force, Bufang could control the dish as easily as drinking water. Swish! He shook the wok, and all the ingredients were put into the spatula. They were poured into the blue and white porcelain plate he had prepared. A piece of sweet and sour ribs was done, emitting a dazzling radiance. Squinting, Bufang took a deep breath. Reaching out his chopsticks, he picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs and put it in his mouth. As soon as it entered the mouth, instantly, Bufang's eyes brightened. Compared to the previous sweet and sour ribs, the taste of this one was stronger, and it could easily stimulate people's taste buds. When it entered the mouth, it tasted the mellow aroma of sweet and sour ribs. There wasn't much difference, but the biggest difference was the faint power of law wrapped around the sweet and sour ribs. It was the pure power of law, without any attributes. It was this pure power of law that made it more attractive. This power of law could nourish people's mental force. Bufang brought the dish out of the kitchen, handing it to Lord Go. Lord Go's nose twitched. He was so surprised that his fur almost exploded. The sweet and sour ribs had the power of law, and now, Lord Go could steadily improve his cultivation base by eating sweet and sour ribs? Had Bufang Boy's cooking skills reached such a superb level? Lord Go couldn't believe it, but he still chewed hard on the plate, swallowing every piece of sweet and sour ribs. He kept chewing. Di Ting was so envious that he drooled. Sweet and sour ribs, which contained the power of law, was a delicious fighting chicken. If he could have a bite, it would be wonderful. When she saw Lord Dog eating so happily, she felt very happy. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. Sure enough, the improvement of strength brought about great changes. To become the god of cooking at the top of the food chain, whether it was cooking skills or cultivation base, he had to reach the top. He could break through the big bottleneck by completing the turnover task, but he could also work hard on some small bottleneck. Bufang suddenly felt a little satisfied. On the other side, he smelled the aroma of sweet and sour ribs in the air. Yu and Little who was in her arms, stretched their necks, full of desire. Bufang glanced at them. The corners of his mouth twitched, then he turned around, ready to step into the kitchen again. He began to cook for Yu and Little who. He was in a good mood today, so he cooked a few more dishes. However, just as Bufang was about to turn around, a dreadful aura spread out from the outside. That aura was like a furnace that constantly rumbled, causing the void to tremble. Bufang frowned. His divine sense spread out, covering tens of thousands of miles in an instant. Within the range of his divine sense, an aura swept over like the scorching sun. Sensing the pressure and aura, Bufang's expression changed dramatically. It was not only Bufang. Even Lord Go, who was eating sweet and sour ribs, sucked in a cold breath. With a piece of sweet and sour ribs in his mouth, his face was full of shock. Di Ting slumped to the ground, his body shivering. What a terrible aura! Lord Go swallowed the sweet and sour ribs, stood up, and walked around the path understanding tree with enchanting cat-like steps. Di Ting's short legs were shaking, and his whole body was shaking. It's over. They're here. The Divine Dynasty's border officials are here. We killed the Divine Dynasty's emissary. We're finished now. Di Ting's face was full of horror. Alpha was the Divine Dynasty's emissary, but he was killed by him and Lord Go. Now that the border official was here, there was no doubt that he was a god, and he was an emissary that they could not resist. Lord Go frowned and glanced at Di Ting. What are you panicking about? He's just a demigod emissary. Do you think the Divine Dynasty's officials will blame us for killing a demigod? Besides, as a border official, shouldn't he go to Nether Prison first? Why did he come to Earth Prison and take over the whole great Netherworld? Lord Go was puzzled. Bufang stood where he was, his pupils constricting. A familiar yet strange aura enveloped him. Boom! The next moment, the restaurant's door swung open without any wind. Through the door, one could see a towering warship hovering over Acheron City. The whole Acheron City fell silent under its terrible divine might. At the front of the warship, a man of unparalleled elegance, who was even more beautiful than a woman, stood there. With his hands clasped behind his back, he squinted at Bufang and smiled. Chapter 1407. A warship covered the entire Acheron City. It shrouded the entire Acheron City, causing everyone in the city to panic. The terrifying pressure was like a giant rock hanging on everyone's heart. At night, Acheron City, which used to be bustling, became noisy at this moment. At this moment, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone knelt on the ground in fright, as if they were facing a supreme god. The fear in their hearts made them shiver uncontrollably, as if a great terror was about to befall them. The figure standing at the front of the warship was peerless, attracting all the light in the world. It was as if he was the only focus in the world, attracting countless people's eyes. Awe, fear, and fascination, all kinds of gazes were directed at that figure. The doors of Acheron's restaurant opened with a loud bang. That unbelievably beautiful man stood on the deck, clasping his hands. He gently looked down and saw Bufang through the door. What he left was a gentle smile. It was the kind of smile one would get when seeing an old acquaintance. Bufang stood where he was, and all the pores on his body almost stood on end. The other party's gaze gave him an inexplicable strange feeling in his heart. No one knew when Lord Go had appeared next to Bufang. His dog eyes seemed to burst out a dazzling light as he gazed at that unbelievably beautiful figure. How could there be such a beautiful man in this world? Even the usually incomparably narcissistic Nether King Ha felt a little ashamed in front of this man. This man was simply too perfect. He could make women fall in love with him, and make men infatuated with him. The latter's smile, which could make heaven and earth dim, made people's breaths quicken. Step by step, he looked like a devil. The latter walked out of the warship with his hands clasped. He looked like an immortal descending to the world, neither fast nor slow. Shortly after, he landed in Acheron City, standing on the ground in front of Acheron's restaurant. The man sized up the restaurant, his eyes filled with complicated emotions. After a long time, he sighed and strode toward the restaurant. The Harkin saw the figure. Immediately, all the hair on his body stood on end. He cried out in disbelief, then scrambled back into the restaurant. Unfortunately, the beautiful man gently waved his hand at Truth Listener. The next moment, the Harkin's frantically fleeing figure was instantly frozen in place. Then, it slowly flew toward the man. He was a dignified god, but he didn't even have the strength to resist. Truth Listener transformed into a short-legged dog and was hugged by the beautiful man as he gently stroked it. "Who are you?" Seeing that Truth Listener had been easily subdued, Bufang's pupils constricted. Without a doubt, the strength of this man in front of him was absolutely terrifying. At the very least, he's stronger than me. In fact, he's even stronger than the Lord Go. After all, Di Ting was a god. Even if he had only comprehended ordinary law power, it was still not something that ordinary gods could subdue. Not to mention subduing him so easily. "Are you asking me?" The man smiled gently. His eyes seemed to be able to speak as he stared at Bufang, flashing brightly. That light made Bufang's hair stand on end. After all, being stared at by a man with eyes as gentle as water was naturally uncomfortable. "We've met before. We're old acquaintances," the man said with a smile. Then, his face became solemn and solemn. "Those who want to reach the pinnacle are accompanied by disasters. They live and die with a single thought: to break through the cycle of reincarnation, one should abandon everything. Only then can one see a corner of reincarnation. Only by abandoning everything can one glimpse a corner of the transmigration." He put Truth Listener down. After landing, Truth Listener ran away, hiding behind the Lord Go, shivering. In a flash, the beautiful man approached Bufang. His face was less than an inch away from Bufang's. Bufang could even feel the man's warm breath on his face as he spoke. It was a flirtatious feeling. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. You're the guy who was sealed in the Bronze Palace. That's right. No wonder you're the chosen one. You're really smart," the man's magnetic voice rang out as he snapped his fingers. He raised his hand as if he was going to touch Bufang's face. Bufang's figure flashed, and he retreated in a flash. He dodged the man's groping hand. "Don't think that you can hide the fact that you're a man just because you're as beautiful as a woman. You can touch my face without scruples." The latter's hand stopped in midair, and he felt a little embarrassed. Putting down his hand, the unbelievably beautiful man stared at Bufang. "You're growing really fast, faster than me," the man said. He seemed to be reminiscing as he glanced at the Acheron little restaurant. Clasping his hands behind his back, he paced back and forth in the restaurant. For a moment, the atmosphere was somewhat stagnant. Lord Go's expression was a little strange. Did Bufang say this guy is the existence sealed in the Bronze Palace on the Acheron River? The guy who escaped because Bufang picked the senseless lotus? How did he become a border official of the divine dynasty? You don't have to be surprised. I'm not surprised that the Netherworld has become a great world. Of course, I'm surprised to return to the Netherworld, the man said. You didn't come back on your own? Lord Go was a little confused. The man glanced at Lord Go in surprise. Of course not. I was sent back here because I offended someone in the divine dynasty's capital. Di Ting was speechless. Bufang was speechless. He seemed to sense everyone's surprise. The man smiled gently and said, "But it's good that you're back. The Netherworld is more comfortable. Your name is Bufang, isn't it?" "That's a good name. My name is Mu Hongzi, and it's also a good name," Mu Hongzi said with a gentle smile that could topple a country. Bufang was somewhat speechless. This guy is probably a narcissist. However, Bufang also understood in his heart that this fellow should be the previous host. He didn't expect this guy to be the one he met in the Bronze Palace. I can't believe this guy has become a human in just a short period of time. He truly deserves to be the system's chosen one. Like me, he's also the chosen one. Mu Hongzi looked at Bufang tenderly as he walked toward Bufang. Bufang, on the other hand, was forced to keep backing away. This man is coming aggressively, and he seems to have bad intentions toward me. Suddenly Yu, with Little Hu in her arms, stood between them. Yu and Little Hu gave Mu Hongzi a sideways glance at the same time. Mu Hongzi paused. Bufang, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. All hail my sister Nethery. If you want to talk, just talk nicely. Don't touch me, you said expressionlessly. Mu Hongzi glanced at Yu and chuckled again. Well, I didn't expect the cursed goddess to speak up for you. I'll give her some face. Mu Hongzi took a step back, pulled a chair, and sat down. Then, he looked indifferently at Bufang. As soon as I arrived in the Netherworld, I couldn't wait to see you. I saw my old self in you. In fact, Bufang, you're even more developed than I was. With a shake of his hand, a red jade jar appeared in his palm. Swish. He poured 2 glasses of wine. one for himself and the other for Bu Fong. Bu Fong took the red jade porcelain cup. The wine in the cup was clear and did not have a strong aroma. Judging from the smell alone, it did not seem to be a good wine. Have a sip. This is the wine I've carefully brewed. Even the Xiai Divine Dynasty's god kings can't drink it if they want to. Mu Hongzhi chuckled. As soon as he said that, he drained the wine in the cup. His beautiful face was slightly furrowed, which made him look pitiful. Bu Fong glanced at him expressionlessly. How could he be so coquettish when drinking wine? Then, he exhaled softly. This Mu Hongzhi must have something to say to me, but since he's not in a hurry, Bu Fong isn't in a hurry either. He picked up the wine cup, touched it with his lips, and drained it in one gulp. Rumble! The wine went down his throat. An explosive aroma of wine burst out of Bu Fong's body in an instant. Bu Fong's consciousness seemed to travel through the void, except for Mu Hongzhi, who was sitting opposite him. Except for Mu Hongzhi, who was sitting opposite him, everything had disappeared. The Lord Go, Yu, Hades era, the artifact spirit, and even the system can't feel anything. Bu Fong even forgot to savor the taste of the wine in his mouth. He jerked his head up and looked at Mu Hongzhi, who was smiling gently at him. Chapter 1408. What is this Mu Hongzhi's purpose? What in the world was that glass of wine that he gave her? It's called wine, but it doesn't taste like wine. It had a unique aroma, and when it entered his mouth, he felt as if 100 flowers were blooming. But that was not the point. Bu Fong glanced around and found that the surroundings seemed to be covered with a thick layer of mist, obscuring his vision. I'm with you and the others in that restaurant, but I can't sense them. That was not all. To his horror, Bu Fong found that he could no longer sense the 4 artifact spirits and the system in his spirit sea. Did this Mu Hongzhi block the system? His purpose is obviously not simple. Sitting in a chair, Mu Hongzhi held a wine glass and looked at Bu Fong with a faint smile. His eyes were gentle and full of kindness, not hostility. Although Mu Hongzhi was the previous host, he had lost the system now, and he had no intention of getting it back. The fact that you got the system means that you are the chosen one, just like me. The fact that you were selected from the billions of living beings in the chaotic universe shows that your luck is indescribable. Mu Hongzhi said softly, toying with the red jade wine glass. Bu Fong did not say anything. The aroma of wine burst out of his mouth, and Bu Fong narrowed his eyes as he listened to Mu Hongzhi. My purpose was the same as yours, to become the real god of cooking. Unfortunately, I was too young at that time, and that's why I died. Mu Hongzhi seemed to be reminiscing. However, although my fleshly body is dead, my soul is not. It lingered on in the bronze palace, suppressed and restrained by the power of the law. Eventually, I was released by you and regained my fleshly body. This is all karma. Mu Hongzhi looked tenderly at Bu Fong. The system was the cause that connected all karma. He had given Bu Fong so many pointers because he wanted to tell Bu Fong that the path to becoming the god of cooking was not easy. However, Bu Fong had risen faster than he had imagined. He had returned to the netherworld so soon to protect Bu Fong. But now it seemed like he didn't need it anymore. What Bu Fong needed was a wider world. Therefore, next he might have to provide Bu Fong with a way to travel to a wider world. Bu Fong pondered for a moment, then nodded with an expressionless face. He felt that what Mu Hongzhi said made sense. Mu Hongzhi narrowed his eyes. Why don't you say something too? Don't just keep quiet. It's making me uncomfortable to chat like this. Mu Hongzhi said with a smile. He did look rather embarrassed. Bu Fong was stunned. If you wanted me to talk to you, you should have said so earlier. Pardon me for asking, but how did you die back then? With your strength, or rather, with the help of the system, ordinary people shouldn't be able to kill you, let alone destroy your physical body. Bu Fong said solemnly. He was curious and confused about this question. Mu Hongzhi died, and his soul was sealed in the Bronze Palace. There seemed to be a source for all this. I killed a disgusting thing. I don't know how that thing appeared in the netherworld, but after killing those guys, I was seriously injured. Then, some little guys took advantage of the situation and destroyed my body. However, those little guys were too weak to destroy my divine consciousness. That was why my soul was sealed by the power of the law until you helped me undo it. As for that disgusting thing, you'll meet it later. It's too early to tell you now, Mu Hongzhi said. He looked at Bufang with admiration. In Bufang, Mu Hongzhi saw the shadow of himself. The system. Oh, you should call it the system, right? In any case, you are the same as me, a host. But before you, I had once tracked down the traces of other hosts. To be honest, there were very few, and even if there were only some vague legends left. These hosts all ended up dying in the end. I've speculated about the origin of the system. It's very likely that it's an inheritance created by some supreme almighty. Of course, there's another possibility that's also very scary. Mu Hongzhi poured himself another glass of wine, took a sip, and said, "What possibility?" Bufang was suddenly very interested. He did not expect that Mu Hongzhi would talk about the origin of the system with him. Bufang had made a lot of guesses about the origin of the system. However, none of them had a reasonable explanation, and it had something to do with his vision. "You've heard of raising gu, haven't you?" Mu Hongzhi said with a smile. "Yes, I've heard of it." Bufang nodded. "Well, I'm that failed gu." Mu Hongzhi spread his arms and smiled faintly, but there was a hint of sadness in his smile. "Don't worry, I won't covet the system in your body. I can't take that thing away from you. I just can't accept it. After all, I once yearned to reach the pinnacle. I wanted to know what the scenery would be like at the end. Unfortunately, I failed. Fortunately, I was resurrected and I met you." Looking at Bufang, Mu Hongzhi's eyes suddenly became very eager. "You have given me hope. I want to see you reach the peak, and I will protect you." "Protect me? Is this Mu Hongzhi trying to protect me to reach the peak? Is he trying to fulfill his wish by helping me reach the peak because he did not have the chance to see the peak? This is an obsession. I'm curious. How great is the peak? I'm not convinced that an excellent man like me can become a failed gu," Mu Hongzhi said seriously. Bufang was speechless. Sure enough, the root of everything was narcissism. Bufang was much more relaxed now that he knew Mu Hongzhi's purpose, even though he did not completely trust him. Although he did not fully believe him, Bufang would never mistake Mu Hongzhi's kindness. Bufang could feel that although Mu Hongzhi was curious about his system, he disdained to snatch it. Yes, he disdained it. He was a proud man, and he was proud from the bottom of his heart. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, you are not a native of the netherworld, are you? That's because it's impossible for the host to be a native of the netherworld. I can tell you the truth. The netherworld was originally a system's farmland. Unfortunately, it was broken. The host of that generation died, so the netherworld was reduced to ruins. You should know my heaven and earth farmland. It's the Heaven Chief realm, Mu Hongzhi said, stroking his chin. He was a little curious about Bufang's background. "The chaotic universe is vast, so I'm curious about which planet you are from." "I'm from a distant blue planet, which has water, land, and all kinds of people. There are 4 seasons in a year, and it's so beautiful," Mu Hongzhi chattered. Bufang could not tell that this fellow was a chatterbox. The more he listened, the stranger Bufang's expression became. "A blue planet, Earth?" Bufang asked, twitching his mouth. His voice stopped abruptly. Mu Hongzhi looked at Bufang in surprise, and his eyes grew brighter and brighter. A fellow countryman. Rumble." In the blink of an eye, Bufang's mental force returned to his fleshly body. He looked at Mu Hongzhi with a faint smile on his face. Around him, Lord Go Yu and the others were looking at him worriedly. Well, the chit-chat is officially over. From today on, I, Mu Hongzhi, am the ruler of the great netherworld sent by the Shui divine dynasty. Mu Hongzhi rose to his feet. Her peerlessly beautiful face became much more dignified and dignified. His indifferent eyes swept across the crowd. Everyone felt their bodies being oppressed. Di Ting hid behind Lord Go, shivering. Mu Hongzhi waved his hand, and Di Ting immediately fell into his arms. He rubbed Di Ting's head, then turned and left. Before leaving, he walked to the door. With a charming smile, he winked at Bufang. The next moment, he turned, soared into the sky, and stepped onto the warship. Rumble, a horn sounded. The warship rose into the sky. Only then did the pressure that enveloped Earth prison disappear. Lord Go shuddered as he watched Mu Hongzhi leave. This man is really scary. He's unfathomable. My law of time can't suppress him at all. In fact, I'm suppressed instead. He must be comprehending the supreme law of the universe. Lord Go took a deep breath and said, "He is comprehending the law of destruction," Bufang said. Lord Go paused and gave Bufang a puzzled look. How did Bufang know? Bufang did not answer Lord Go. Instead, the system in his head, which Mu Hongzhi had blocked, spoke in a familiar voice. The serious and solemn voice made Bufang's pupils constrict. Chapter 1409. Temporary task. Please go to the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty's capital and open a branch there. Task reward: 1 fruit of law and 2 god of cooking's divine power liquid drop. The system's serious voice rang out in Bufang's head. That gave Bufang pause. Go to the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty's capital? Isn't this task a little difficult for me? How big was the netherworld, and how big was the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty? A divine dynasty was formed by many great worlds, and there must be many first-class great worlds among them. The netherworld was just a third-class great world, and it could not even cause a stir in the divine dynasty. And now, the system was asking him to go to the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty? The task looked simple, but it was actually very difficult. It was like asking a villager who farmed land to open a company in a big city in Beijing, Shanghai, or Guangzhou. It was extremely difficult, but the reward was not bad. He got a fruit of law and a divine power liquid drop. There was no doubt that the fruit of law could help Bufang comprehend the power of the laws. However, it was indeed time for Bufang to leave the netherworld. It could no longer satisfy Bufang now. Bufang needed a wider world and more business. Bufang pondered. The system fell silent after sending out the task. Mu Hongzhi's departure brought peace back to Acheron City. The hustle and bustle continued, and the sleepless city, Acheron City, was as lively as ever. Bufang closed the restaurant door. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. He came to the heaven and earth farmland. It was as calm as ever. With the improvement of Bufang's cultivation base, the farmland had expanded again and was now boundless. With Niu Hansen here, Bufang did not need to worry about the farmland's reclamation. The whole farmland was full of life and lush. All kinds of spirit beasts lived leisurely in it, and fish and shrimps swam in the river of life. A blood lobster waved its claws in the river. An octopus lay motionless on the ground. Xiaopi turned into a stream of light and flew through it. He seemed to have sensed Bufang's arrival. Xiaopi exploded out of the river and turned into a golden light. It instantly appeared beside Bufang and lay on Bufang's shoulder. Bufang raised his hand and rubbed Xiaopi's head. Bufang landed. The other apprentices also gathered around, looking at Bufang curiously. After instructing the apprentices, Bufang left the place, strolling in the heaven and earth farmland. He arrived in front of the heaven tree and took a seed. This was what Bufang had promised the heaven tree. After taking the seed, Bufang continued to exercise for a while before leaving the heaven and earth farmland. His heaven and earth farmland was getting bigger and bigger, and the spiritual energy was getting denser. High-grade creatures and top-grade ingredients were all gathered in it. It made the heaven and earth farmland Bufang's back garden. However, this was far from enough. Bufang still needed to put higher-grade creatures and ingredients into the farmland. Buzz walking out of the heaven and earth farmland, Bufang's divine sense surged. It tore the void. When he stepped out again, Bufang came to the Heaven Chief Realm. The Heaven Chief Realm was boundless. The fifth layer, the Realm Lord Dit knelt on the ground, his eyes lifeless. Next to him, there was a huge hole where the Heaven Tree used to grow. The Heaven Tree was the pillar of the Heaven Chief Realm. But now, even without the Heaven Tree, the Heaven Chief Realm was still thriving, and the density of spiritual energy was rising instead of decreasing. This was a little strange. Of course, although the spiritual energy didn't decrease, the Heaven Chief Realm without the Heaven Tree had lost its meaning. The Realm Lord Dit seemed to sense the visitor, and he slowly raised his head. The handsome Realm Lord Dit seemed to have aged a lot. Bufang, the Realm Lord Dit's lips moved for a while before he opened his mouth. Bufang nodded. He had learned from Mu Hongzhi that the Heaven Tree was taken by Mu Hongzhi. However, losing the Heaven Tree was also a blow to the Realm Lord Dit. In fact, it was a blessing in disguise for the Realm Lord Dit. Since the Heaven Tree was taken away by Mu Hongzhi, he would definitely nourish the Heaven Tree and upgrade the Heaven Tree's level. The Realm Lord Dit and the Heaven Tree's cultivation base were one. As long as the Heaven Tree became a god, the Realm Lord Dit would also become a god. Therefore, this was the Realm Lord Dit's opportunity. However, the Realm Lord Dit was still sad. Without the Heaven Tree, he felt like he had lost his support. Bufang didn't want to persuade him. This kind of thing needed the Realm Lord Dit to slowly walk out of it. He came to the huge hole. It was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. Bufang took out the seed of the Heaven Tree and flicked his finger. The seed shot out and fell into the hole. A loud rumble rang out. The hole in the Heaven Chief Realm began to wriggle. Then, branches flew in all directions. The Heaven Chief Realm was shaken. Many people cheered as they excitedly looked at the phenomenon that had suddenly appeared. The Heaven Tree had returned. The Realm Lord Dit stared blankly. In the end, tears streamed down his face. The Heaven Tree was no longer the Heaven Tree he was familiar with. After all, its branches were lush and full of leaves, swaying gracefully. The Heaven Tree, grown from the seed of the Heaven Tree in the heaven and earth farmland, swayed gently in the sky and brought hope to the Heaven Chief Realm. Bufang didn't return to Earth Prison. Instead, he went straight to Nether Prison. Mu Hongzhi's Palace of Rulers was built in Nether Prison. In the central city of the vast Nether Prison, where Di Ting's clan land used to be, a tall building had risen from the ground. On the side of the building was a huge warship the size of a mountain. Mu Hongzhi stood at the edge of the warship with a wine glass in his hand, feeling the breeze. When Bufang arrived, he talked to him a lot and told him that he was going to the Xiai Divine Dynasty. Mu Hongzhi was not surprised. He seemed to have known that Bufang would go to the Xiai Divine Dynasty. Mu Hongzhi, who was more beautiful than most women, took out a jade pendant from his pocket and handed it to Bufang. This was the token he gave to Bufang, and it was one of the ways he protected Bufang. He said that as long as Bufang came to the Xiai Divine Dynasty and showed him the token, everyone would show him some respect. Bufang put away the jade pendant with a strange look on his face. Why did it sound so unreliable? But Mu Hongzhi smiled mysteriously, so Bufang could only open his mouth and say nothing. After learning something about the Xiai Divine Dynasty from Mu Hongzhi and asking for a star map, Bufang left. He had returned to Earth Prison. After doing all these things, the sky was already bright, and specks of light were spreading from the edge of the sky. The morning star had risen. Bufang opened the restaurant's door. He was ready to start the day. This might be Bufang's last day of business in Earth Prison. After today, Bufang would leave for the Xiai Divine Dynasty. Of course, Acheron's little restaurant would not be closed. Bufang had chosen one of his former apprentices to open the restaurant in Earth Prison. The former apprentices had already reached a very good level through the exchange of culinary skills. He was not bad enough to be a chef in Acheron's little restaurant. This was also the reason why Bufang could leave with peace of mind. On this day, Acheron's little restaurant was still bustling with customers. The line outside the restaurant stretched all the way to the city gate of Acheron. In the distance, Mu Hongzhi stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a warm smile on his devastatingly beautiful face. Di Ting, in his arms, was squinting comfortably. A bustling restaurant is really a nostalgic taste. I really look forward to seeing if you can continue the restaurant's popularity after you go to the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty. The chefs there are not easy to deal with. It was late at night. The restaurant was closed. Bufang closed the restaurant's door. Then, he called the guests over. Hades Era, Hades Tenzang, Great Sage Acheron, Lord Go Yu, and so on. The crowd sat on chairs in the restaurant and looked at Bufang in confusion. Yu had a deep look in her eyes. She could feel that Bufang seemed to have something important to tell them. Therefore, everyone sat upright and still, no longer smiling mischievously. When Bufang told them that he was going to the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty, they were all shocked. Only Lord Go was not surprised. Based on Lord Go's understanding of Bufang, he knew that Bufang would not hide in a corner of the netherworld, so he was not surprised by the news. In fact, when Mu Hongzhi appeared, Lord Go knew that Bufang would leave the netherworld one day. Lord Go wants to eat sweet and sour ribs. Bufang boy, wherever you go, Lord Go will go. Isn't it the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty? Even if Lord Go goes there, he can still make wave. Lord Dog yawned, and the fat on his body jiggled as he said, I'll go wherever Bufang goes, Yu nodded. In her arms, Little Hu also clenched his little fists and nodded seriously. The corners of Bufang's mouth curved upward slightly. He felt that it was a good feeling. Then, he turned his eyes to Hades Era and Tiansong. Tiansong shook his head, took a deep breath, and said, Let Era go with you. I don't want to go out and cause trouble. I'm a man who has died once. Nether King Air Ha furrowed his brows. Tiansong patted Era on the head and said, Go and follow Owner Bu. At least come back with a good result. Let me be proud of you. Hades Era stared blankly at Tiansong. He wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Eventually, he fell silent and said nothing. The great sage Acheron did not want to leave. He had lived in the netherworld for tens of thousands of years, and he could not bear to leave it. All right, let's get ready now. We'll set off at dawn, Bufang said. The crowd fell silent, then turned and left. Hades Era and Hades Tenzang put their arms around each other's shoulders and left. Lord Dog took advantage of this time to lie under the Path Understanding tree and sleep for a while. You went upstairs and began to pack some luggage. Before dawn, they were waiting in the restaurant. She sat on the deck of the netherworld ship with Little Hu in her arms, swinging her fair legs. Xiao Hua, on the other hand, followed her obediently. In the kitchen, Bufang told him what he needed to pay attention to and taught him how to cook. Finally, it was time. Bufang walked out of the kitchen. Xiao Bai followed him. With a creak, the door of the restaurant opened. Outside the door, Venus was flashing dazzlingly in the sky. Mu Hongzhi walked through the air at a steady pace. Soon, he landed in front of the crowd. Are you ready? Mu Hongzhi smiled gently, but his smile made everything look bleak. Bufang and the others nodded. Then, Mu Hongzhi flipped his hand. Immediately, a warship flew out, grew in midair, and turned into the size of a house. I've set the coordinates of the nearest teleportation array node in this warship. You can take the warship there. Once you reach the coordinates, you can start the void teleportation, Mu Hongzhi chuckled. Suddenly, he turned his eyes and rested them on you. He squinted at Bufang and said, Don't blame me for not warning you. Once you arrive at the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty, this little girl will be very popular. Chapter 1410. Popular? That gave Bufang pause. Mu Hongxi's description of you is really strange and interesting, he thought to himself. But soon, Bufang's pupils constricted. Is it because of Yu's constitution? Yu's cursed constitution, which is like a nightmare, has become the source of attraction for so many experts in the divine dynasty? When Mu Hongxi saw that Bufang seemed to understand what he meant, he nodded with satisfaction. He is indeed the chosen one, chosen by the system, just like me. His comprehension is indeed amazing. His comprehension is not much worse than mine. He's a promising student. The law of curse is also a very powerful law, and it can be considered a top law below the supreme laws of the universe. As a cursed goddess, the curse in this little girl will attract the covetous eyes of countless gods who cultivate the law of curse. To put it simply, this little girl is a good cauldron. Mu Hongxi said with a smile. A cauldron? Bufang's eyes narrowed. He glanced at Yu, who was holding little Hu in her arms, and took a deep breath. It's fine. You will follow me, and I'll kill as many of those who covet her as they come. Bufang said expressionlessly. Mu Hongxi's eyes became as gentle as water. Domineering. I like your little domineering attitude. You're so cute. All right, let's go. Mu Hongxi said, then gently patted the warship. A loud rumble rang out. The array on the warship flickered, and the next moment, the whole warship turned into a stream of light and sped away. The warship broke through the clouds, rushed out of the darkness, and flew into the boundless starry sky, quietly flying in the starry sky. It was very fast, and rumbling filled the air. However, despite this rapid movement, the interior of the warship was extremely quiet. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. High-grade warships are indeed different. It's already good enough for an ordinary warship to cross the void for a short distance. This warship's material is so good that it feels so comfortable to fly. Hades Era said with a smile, sitting in the warship and leisurely holding a spicy strip between his lips. Through the transparent windows of the battleship, one could see the starry sky outside. The people in the warship could clearly feel that the warship was flying, and in just a short while, it had flown out of the netherworld's territory. In everyone's eyes, the netherworld continued to shrink. Soon, it turned into a black dot and disappeared. Meanwhile, the stars around the warship were rapidly retreating. This meant that as soon as they left the netherworld, the warship began to accelerate. Inside the warship, it was extremely quiet. Only the sound of breathing could be heard. Lord Go was sleeping soundly in the cabin. The fat on his body rose and fell as he breathed. With a spicy strip in his mouth, Hades Era turned to look at the starry sky. Nethery, on the other hand, sat quietly with Foxy in her arms. Flowery stood beside her, blinking her big eyes. This was the first time they had left the netherworld, so they were a little nervous. Even Hades Era had a reluctant look on his face. After all, leaving home for the unknown world of the divine dynasty always made people feel a little melancholy. To break the strange atmosphere, Bufang thought for a moment. He rose to his feet and walked around the cabin. Mu Hongxi's warship was specially prepared for chefs, and it was fully equipped with kitchen equipment. Bufang walked to the kitchen. With a flick of his finger, he produced a silver-white divine flame. The flame immediately burned and the void seemed to twist. He took out the black turtle constellation wok and placed it on the fire. Then, Bufang began to cook. This time, he was going to cook a dish from his memory. Bufang had cooked this dish a long time ago. He wanted to use it to sweep away the sadness of parting and make everyone feel happy. His mind sank into the heaven and earth farmland. Bufang went to Nyo Hansen's wooden hut and took out a fat fish. It was filled with pink distiller's grains, and a rich aroma of wine wafted out of it. It was distiller's grains made from rice that contained the will of the great path. The fish was marinated with distiller's grains to produce a delicious taste. Of course, to become a real delicacy, it needed to be processed. Holding the fish's tail, Bufang returned to the warship. The isolation of the kitchen was very good, so the aroma of the dishes in the kitchen would not spread into the cabin. He held the kitchen knife. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in Bufang's hand. Bufang pressed the fish's head. Buzz, a wave of fluctuation spread. Bufang's knife slashed down like a shooting star. The flesh on both sides of the fish was cut open like a blooming flower, and the fish bones were removed. After wiping the distiller's grains, he picked up a few small mushrooms. He made a crosscut on the back of the mushrooms, then placed them in the fish plate. Then, he poured the spring of life into the black turtle constellation wok and began to cook them. During this process, Bufang's divine sense slowly spread out, spreading into the fish plate like thread. He could feel the texture of the fish and the changes in the distiller's grains. The liquor in the distiller's grains seeped into the fish, causing the white and tender fish to change a little. The mushrooms swelled up, releasing a thick fragrance. Mixing with the fish, it gave people a unique and indescribable experience. Gurgle, gurgle. The black turtle constellation wok's lid seemed to flip under the impact of the steam. The steam was expelled from the vent, flowing through the tail of the warship, out of the cabin. Buzz inside the chaotic space turbulence, an asteroid exploded. A series of explosions echoed. Instantly, a figure shrouded in black energy shattered the asteroid, flying out, zooming across the starry sky. This black octopus-like savage beast looked very ferocious. Its body was covered in mucus. Its mouth had sharp teeth. When it opened its mouth, it seemed to be absorbing the strange energy in the universe. As he flew, his body began to swell up. As this octopus flew, it soon rushed into the starry sky. In the starry sky, there was a huge teleportation formation entrenched there. An expert could be seen sitting on top of the spell formation, emanating a terrifying aura. It was a god. The power of the laws lingering around his body faintly caused the void to collapse. All of a sudden, the expert opened his eyes. His eyes seemed to shoot out sharp light. He gazed at the void in the distance and saw a black shadow slowly flying across the starry sky. "What is that?" The expert opened his eyes. His eyes were clear, as if the stars were about to shatter under his gaze. The man stood up. He raised his hand, swinging it. Immediately, the runes of law hovered above his palm. Eventually, they turned into a bow and arrow. He knocked the arrow. A buzzing sound rang out. The arrow shot out, tearing through the sky as it shot towards the pitch-black and ugly ferocious beast. Boom! It exploded. The arrow hit the savage beast. Like fireworks, the entire starry sky was filled with light. The corners of the man's mouth curved into a smile. "A mere savage beast of the starry sky is nothing in front of my law of explosion. No matter what, I am the god in charge of the void crossing array, an official of the divine dynasty. A mere savage beast of the starry sky is nothing to me." The corners of the man's mouth curved upward. He let go of the longbow in his hand. Turning around, he sat back in the center of the array. Rumble in the sky, flames surged. Suddenly, the flame swelled up and was suddenly swallowed by a huge suction force. The man's body trembled, and he jerked his head around. He saw a shadow growing bigger and bigger in front of him. Ah! A miserable scream echoed through the starry sky. "Smiling Lee's fish, it's done." Satisfied, Bufang opened the lid of the wok. A majestic aroma surged out. The Lee's fish contained the will of the great path and the faint power of law, making people sink into it. Nowadays, Bufang could cook any dish to a superb level. His cooking skills had long surpassed the scope of mortals. He opened the kitchen door. Bufang carried the dish into the cabin. A moment later, the cabin was enveloped by a rich aroma. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Since there was food to eat, everyone naturally gathered together. Even Lord Go, who was lying on the floor and snoring, widened his eyes, his paws on the table, looking forward to the dish. The tender Lee's fish was cut with Bufang's knife skill. It looked like a flower of war. The fish's head was upright, and the corners of its mouth were curved upward. There were a few small shiitake mushrooms around it, like stars, which made the dish even more attractive. It's really a smiling Lee's fish. Hades' face turned a little strange. He didn't expect that the serious-looking Bufang young man could cook such a dish. Everyone grabbed their chopsticks and began to eat, not leaving a single bite for Bufang. All the fish went into their mouth. After eating the fish, everyone's eyes lit up. The corners of their mouths curved upward involuntarily. They closed their eyes and indulged in the fragrance of the fish and the mushrooms, unable to extricate themselves. Bufang's heart was filled with joy as he watched them eat so happily. This was the charm of delicious food. Delicious food could affect one's emotions and arouse a diner's emotions. How to make food have the ability to control one's emotions was a test of the chef's cooking skills. Bufang breathed out a long sigh, turned his head, and looked out the window with a smile. The warship slowed down. From a distance, he could see a huge array in the starry sky. It looked dreamlike, with an enchanting mystery, and anyone who saw it could not help but be immersed in it. Is this the void-crossing array that Mu Hongzhi mentioned? As long as I take this array, I can go to the great world where the Xiai divine dynasty is? Bufang thought to himself. Rumble. The warship rumbled. It turned into a stream of light and sped toward the array. Suddenly, through the transparent window, Bufang focused his eyes and stared at the array in the distance. He seemed to see a black ball-shaped object beating like a heart in the center of the array. Chapter 14:11. The atmosphere in the warship was very good. With a dish, Bufang had stirred up everyone's mood. They were a little sad about leaving the netherworld, but now they were all happy. All that was left on the table was a lone fish head and some aromatic broth. The fish covered with lees had basically been finished by everyone. The dishes cooked by Bufang now were delicious, and they had special functions. After eating, they could feel the aura boiling in them. If they focused on cultivating, they could even improve their cultivation bases significantly. It was worth noting that the weakest of the people present was the 9-revolution Great Sage, and it was very difficult for them to improve their cultivation bases. However, Bufang's dishes could help them improve their cultivation bases, which was very incredible. They cleaned up the table. Bufang sat quietly in the cabin, looking at the dreamy array outside. It was the void-crossing array that Mu Hongzhi had mentioned. Through it, they could go to the great world where the Xiai divine dynasty was located. With this formation, they would be able to save a lot of time. If they didn't have this formation, they would have to rely solely on the warship to fly. Who knew how many years it would take? After all, the distance between great worlds was just too great. Within the cabin, everyone was enthusiastically chatting about the Lee's fish. They all had pleasant smiles on their faces, and from time to time, they would lick their lips in relish. The warship sped past, leaving a trail of white smoke in the starry sky as it sped toward the array. Look, we're almost at the array. Nether King Ha excitedly leaned on the window, shouting at the crowd. His eyes were bright as he stared curiously and appreciatively at the dreamy array outside the window. The array was huge, flashing with a silvery white light in the starry sky like a beautiful star. It could not help but attract one's attention. Just as Hades' was looking at it in fascination, suddenly, a thud rang out. Suddenly, a black shadow shot out from the window of the warship. With a bang, it smashed into the window of the warship, giving Hades' a fright. The spicy strip in his mouth almost fell to the ground. What the hell? Hades' sucked in a breath of cold air and narrowed his eyes. To his horror, he discovered that what had hit the window was actually a palm bone. His bones were full of cracks, as if they had been chewed by some ferocious beast. Bufang and the others also noticed it. A gust of wind blew over and blew away the palm bone. Only an afterimage was left. Are those skeletons? Your sudden appearance almost scared me to the point that I dropped my spicy strip. Hades' Era said with lingering fear. The starry sky is boundless, and this is the battlefield of the great sage. Isn't it normal for corpses to appear here? The great sage and gods often fight here. Lord Go said lazily. He looked down on Hades' Era for making a fuss about nothing. But Hades' Era hesitated. Just now, he saw some flesh on the palm bone. It didn't look like a rotten body that had been dead for a long time. It felt a little strange. However, seeing that everyone looked normal, Nether King Ha could only hold back the words in his mouth. With a loud bang, the warship shot out. Like a shooting star, it rapidly descended toward the center of the array. Shortly after, it landed on the array. This array was carved on a huge meteorite. The dazzling light of the array covered the meteorite. From a distance, it looked like the array was embedded in the starry sky. They walked out of the warship. Under their feet was the glittering array. It seemed to be quite old. It was a little dilapidated, and it had an ancient aura. Bufang put away the warship. Later, when they were going to cross the void, they would need to use the warship. Didn't that sissy say that there's someone watching over this array? We just need to contact that person, and we can cross the void. But I don't see anyone. Hades' Era's face was puzzled. He glanced around. The array was empty. There was no sign of life. Bufang also felt a little strange. Eventually, his eyes locked on the center of the array. In other words, it was on top of the ball that was beating like a heart. The appearance of this ball here was somewhat unexpected. Found it. In the distance, Lord Go's magnetic voice echoed. They walked over. They saw the star map drawn on it. The star map showed the location of the array after crossing the void. Since there's no one here, we have to activate this array ourselves. That's the only way to leave this place, Lord Go said. After saying that, his dog paw shone with a golden luster. This was the divine skill Lord Go had comprehended, the golden dog paw. The dog paw fell. It gently patted the array. Instantly, the array let out a roar. Beams of light shot up from the array, gathering in the void to form a huge arched door. The arched door was filled with a mysterious power. There was no doubt that this was the entrance to the void crossing. Bufang called the others, and they stepped into the warship. With excitement in their hearts, they started the warship and rushed into the circular arched door. However, they didn't notice something. Just as they stepped into the formation, a voice suddenly rang out. The surface of the ball that was beating like a beating heart suddenly cracked. It was as if there was a blood-like mucus flowing down. Swoosh! Above the ball, a scarlet eyeball emerged. The eyeball kept rolling. In the end, it slowly tore open, and a one-eyed crimson figure crawled out of the sphere. The one-eyed figure rolled its eyeball. Finally, it landed on the warship that was entering the void crossing array. His tentacles emerged from the back of the figure. The next moment, it disappeared as if it had teleported. At the same time, the arched door of the teleportation array began to slowly disappear. At the last moment, the arched door disappeared. In an instant, the blood-colored figure entered it, rumble. Even a warship that was extremely comfortable could not bear the burden of traveling through the void. The tearing force of crossing the void was so strong that ordinary people couldn't bear it. However, the warship was made of good materials, so it wasn't torn to pieces by the tearing force. Outside the window, the scenery was rapidly disappearing, leaving only streaks of light that were rapidly passing by. Without a doubt, they were crossing the void. Bufang could feel that they were leaving the great netherworld. His sense of the great netherworld was getting weaker and weaker, almost to the point of disappearing. This time, he was really going to leave. Bufang sat in front of the window, drinking the steaming 9-revolution Great Path tea. He looked at the scene outside. There were stars, galaxies, and even black holes. At this moment, the breathtaking scenery in the starry sky was rapidly retreating. They were like passers-by, enjoying the beautiful scenery of the universe. Bufang watched. All of a sudden, bam! Bufang's pupils constricted and his pores tightened. On the window, with a clatter, a mass of darkness seemed to have hit it. The window was covered with cracks that looked like a spider web. What? Bufang furrowed his brows. The next moment, the pitch-black figure suddenly opened its eyes. Boom! The eyes were filled with brutality and killing intent, and a terrible, brutal aura spread in an instant. Inside the cabin, everyone's emotions instantly tensed up. Even Lord Go, who was sleeping soundly on the floor, jerked his head up, feeling a terrible murderous aura. What is this thing? Hades' Era looked at the eyeball in surprise. However, what was even more horrifying was that the eyeball moved. It moved from side to side, leaving behind a slime. It seemed to have locked onto everyone in the cabin. Finally, the figure opened its mouth, which was like the mouth of a devil, and let out a terrible roar. Boom! The warship suddenly shook violently. Bufang and the others were shocked. They looked up. They found that the warship was covered with cracks. In the next moment, numerous tentacles tore through the exterior of the warship and shot toward the people in the cabin. A terrible aura filled the air. It was not weaker than a god. What kind of creature was that? Why did it appear in the void passage? Bufang sucked in a breath of cold air. It was unbelievable. Finally, bam! The entire warship exploded. The terrible tearing force of the void passage broke out. The terrible figure hovering in the void passage let out a shrill laugh. Turning into a beam of light, it pounced on Bufang and the others. A terrible crisis descended. Chapter 14:12. Rumble. Inside the void traversal passage, a terrifying storm condensed and swept out. The blade-like waves of air bombarded everyone's bodies, causing them to tremble in fear. Lord Go waved his paw. His divine sense spread and enveloped you, little Hu and Hua, protecting them from the storm. Hades' Era, on the other hand, was not so lucky. He could only try his best to create an energy shield around him so that he would not be killed by the storm. Bufang hovered in the void. The vermilion robe flashed with a scarlet radiance as it blocked the terrifying energy storm around it. He blocked the terrifying energy storms around him, which made him look rather relaxed. At least, he was much more relaxed than Nether King Erha, whose face was red from holding back his energy. Of course, Xiao Bai was even more straightforward. He did not even bother to create an energy shield. Even when the energy storm hit him, it only produced a clanging sound. In the distance, a blood-red figure hovered in the air, with tentacles waving behind his back as if they were going to whip and shatter the void at any time. It was extremely terrifying. There was no doubt that this was a very terrifying creature. His aura was not weaker than a god's, and he was unharmed even when the storm hit him. The warship was blown up by this creature. What was this creature? A cosmic savage beast? Bufang's eyes narrowed. Mu Hongzhi had told him about the dangers in the universe. Among them, the cosmic savage beasts were very terrifying. They were the vermin in the starry sky. However, this was somewhat different from the cosmic savage beasts Mu Hongzhi had told him about. The cosmic savage beasts Mu Hongzhi had told him about were basically social creatures. They always moved in groups. Wherever they went, planets would be destroyed, and living beings would be plunged into misery and suffering. However, there was only one creature in front of him, System. What kind of creature is this? Bufang took a deep breath and asked the System. The System must know something. Buzz, however, after asking, Bufang did not receive any prompt from the System. This surprised Bufang. Did the System not know what this creature was? Host's level is too low, unable to detect. The System's serious and solemn voice resounded. Bufang was slightly stunned. He didn't expect to receive such an answer. My level is too low? Unable to find out the origin of this creature? Without a doubt, This creature was no ordinary space beast. It let out a roar. The void passage seemed to be trembling. In the next moment, the creature covered in tentacles turned into a streak of blood-colored light and shot out. It was extremely fast. Buzz, a tentacle lashed out like a spear, aiming straight at Bufang, intending to pierce through Bufang's head in an instant. There were strange patterns circulating on the tentacles, emitting a deadly aura that made one's heart palpitate. Law? Bufang was stunned. Zhang Xian thought. Instantly, a silver divine flame appeared in Bufang's hand. He flicked his finger. The divine fire leaped out and shot towards the tentacle. It collided with the tentacle. There was a soft bang. The divine flame was extinguished. The beast's tentacle was scorched black, emitting a strange meaty aroma. As if in pain, the beast let out an angry roar. His body suddenly grew so huge that it almost shattered the void passage. Swish, droplets of mucus splattered from his body. As they splashed in the passage, they corroded it. What a disgusting and terrible beast! Lord Go protected you and the others, indifferently looking at the giant beast. He didn't move. Bufang and the ferocious beast were locked in a fierce battle, and they seemed to be exchanging blows. Although in terms of pure power, Bufang was at a disadvantage, Bufang's divine flame and the power of law were very powerful. Buzz, all of a sudden, a rune of law emerged on the beast's tentacle. Then, it lashed out at Bufang. The place where Bufang stood exploded, and a terrible rumble swept out. Even Bufang was knocked flying backward by the impact. This aura. It's the black ball in the array. Bufang took a deep breath. This thing could use the power of law. Bufang could sense that the power of law did not belong to the beast itself, but something external. He seemed to think of something. Combined with what Hades' era had said about the bloody bones that had crashed into the warship, could it be that the god in charge of the array had been eaten by this beast? Moreover, it had fused with the power of law of a god? Was this beast so terrible? It could devour a god and comprehend their power. If he was allowed to devour even more gods, what would happen to him? Who would be able to stop this creature? Fortunately, it was found in this barren starry sky. If it had gone to the center of the divine dynasty, it would have been a nightmare. Lord Go could no longer sit still. A dog paw stretched across the sky in a flash. Then, it slapped toward the beast. Bang! The beast instantly exploded. Its body seemed to turn into thousands of pieces of sludge, crumbling and dispersing. A foul stench filled the air. However, the ferocious beasts that had exploded quickly gathered together once again and roared. It could not be killed. Lord Go focused his eyes. Although his power was stronger than this beast, its resilience gave Lord Go a headache. Bufang boy, we have to go now. If we delay any longer, the passage will collapse. At that time, none of us will be able to leave. Lord Go said solemnly. Bufang nodded seriously. He did not want to tangle with the beast any longer. However, even if Bufang did not entangle with him, the beast would not let him go. It had its eyes on Bufang and the others. In its eyes, Bufang and the others were the most delicious food. As long as it ate them, its power would continue to increase. Swish, the tentacles lashed in the void. A moment later, the beast crazily dashed toward Bufang again. It was so fast that people's eyes could not follow it. If it weren't for Bufang releasing his divine consciousness, Bufang would have been pierced through by this beast in just a blink of an eye. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. A roar rang out. Instantly, the dragon bone kitchen knife bloomed with radiance. One slash, cutting immortal. A knife light that could tear the sky shot out. It slashed toward the beast, trying to cut it into two halves. However, the saber glow did not cause any damage to the ferocious beast's body even after it entered its body. Instead, the beast opened its mouth and shot out a blood-colored knife light. This fellow was actually imitating Bufang's move. A sense of horror suddenly spread. Rumble! The passage began to shake as if it would collapse at any minute. The Lord Go patted one more time. This time the dog paw fell. The beast exploded again. "Bufong kid! Go!" the Lord Go shouted. He brought you and the others into the void. In just a blink of an eye, they disappeared along with the power of the passage. Hades' Era, who was dripping with blood, followed them. Under the tearing force, he followed the Lord Go's steps, disappearing into the void. Inside the passage, only Bufong and Xiao Bai were left, as well as the beast that the Lord Go had smashed and slowly recovered. The beast roared. Once again, it dashed toward Bufong. It wanted to tear Bufong to pieces. Terrible killing intent filled the air. Looking at the approaching ferocious beast, Bufong let out a long breath. His divine sense surged. Suddenly, the divine flame turned invisible and spread out. The berserk beast suddenly roared. The divine flame collided with the beast. This caused the beast to slowly burn, however. Although the divine flame burned it, the beast quickly recovered. It was as tough as ever. Its blood-colored eyes locked on Bufong. Swish! Cracks appeared around the passage. It was about to collapse. Bufong knew that he couldn't afford to be entangled with this beast. His mind flickered. Suddenly, the perishing pot appeared in his hand. The perishing pot, which was burning in the divine flame, flicked its finger. It turned into a stream of light and shot out. The beast opened its mouth and swallowed the perishing pot. Rumble! The passage began to collapse. Without hesitation, Bufong took Xiao Bai and flew toward the teleportation point. A loud explosion rang out. The passage collapsed inch by inch. Xiao Bai and Bufong rushed into the teleportation vortex in the passage. After they entered, the explosion spread, and the teleportation energy was swallowed up. In the netherworld, on a tall building, Mu Hongzi sat cross-legged, holding a glass of wine and sipping. His eyes were deep. He raised his head and looked at the boundless starry sky. Suddenly, he took a deep breath. The light swirling in his eyes slowly faded. The images disappeared, and his eyes became clear again. "That disgusting thing has appeared again." Chapter 14:13. Rumble. A terrible tearing feeling suddenly exploded. Bufong felt that only the bright Baiguang was left in front of him. His body seemed to sink into the vast sea, constantly bobbing up and down in the storm. He didn't know where he had been blown to. The terrible crisis brought by the blood-colored savage beast in the void passage disappeared. However, the latter was like a heavy nightmare pressing down on Bufong's heart. That kind of creature that could imitate fighting techniques but couldn't kill, it was so disgusting. He didn't know how long he had been bobbing up and down. Finally, Bufong felt his body rushing out of the passage, falling like a cannonball. There was a roar. In an instant, it landed and smashed into the ground, creating a huge and deep pit in the ground. His bones seemed to be about to fall apart. Bufong slowly climbed up from the deep pit. Whitey, on the other hand, stood beside him, its mechanical eyes shining brightly. He really envied Xiao Bai, who had a body of copper skin and iron bones. That kind of fall, but he wasn't hurt at all. Opening his eyes, he seemed to want to adapt to the light around him. After a long time, he got used to the blazing brightness. Scanning around. Only then did Bufong realize that he had actually crashed into a wheat field. This wheat was undoubtedly spirit wheat, with majestic energy growing in it. This spirit wheat is not bad. It's almost the same as the wheat in the heaven and earth farmland. Bufong plucked a stalk of wheat and studied it. His mind flickered, sending the wheat into the heaven and earth farmland. In the farmland there was Nyo Hansan, who was known as the father of hybridization. He was afraid that he could make something good. He didn't know where this place was. Bufong strode forward, bringing Xiao Bai with him. With a shake of the vermilion robe, his wretched appearance was swept away. All the way to the west, because Bufong's divine sense had sensed that there seemed to be the aura of living beings there. Perhaps there was a problem with the void crossing channel, but Bufang's current location should be separated from the Lord Go's location. Perhaps the two of them were worlds apart. However, Bufang was not worried about you and the others staying with Lord Go. After all, the Lord Go's strength was undeniable. Of course, Bufang also needed to think of a way to meet up with Lord Go and the others as soon as possible. He walked unhurriedly. Soon, Bufang saw a small village in the distance. Their speed was very fast. In just a flash, Bufang and Xiao Bai arrived in front of the village. There were many experts guarding the entrance of the village, and they were all on high alert. They sensed Bufang's presence. They all brandished their weapons and stared coldly at him. Bufang was slightly taken aback by this stance. Are all the people outside the netherworld so ferocious? However, Bufang did not care or worry about these experts, whose strongest strength was no stronger than the 9-revolution Great Sage. He didn't want to cause trouble. He just wanted to ask for the way to the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty's capital. He just wanted to ask for directions and leave. However, Bufang had only taken a few steps, and before he reached the village, the sound of hooves rang out behind him. The rumbling of the horses' hooves was accompanied by a loud rumble. Puzzled, Bufang turned his head and saw a group of ferocious-looking experts riding dragon-scale horses toward him with hideous grins on their faces. Their leader was a burly man who carried a giant pumpkin hammer on his shoulder. The two sides faced each other. Bufang was immediately stuck in the middle, and the atmosphere became a little awkward. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he touched his round head. Bufang glanced at the villagers, then at the group of ferocious people behind him. He couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. The people outside the netherworld were really unfriendly. The group of people riding on dragon-scale horses were clearly much stronger than the villagers. Their leader was a demigod. Holding a pumpkin hammer, he looked disdainfully at the villagers who seemed to be about to resist. As for Bufang, he was directly classified as one of the villagers. This was because this demigod sensed that Bufang's cultivation base was too weak. Perhaps it was because Bufang's aura was weak at the moment. After traveling through the void, the energy in his body had long been depleted by the void storm. There was no energy left in him. It was normal for this burly man to sense that Bufang was weak. Suddenly, a young man rushed out of the crowd of villagers, grabbed Bufang, and brought him back to the village. Bufang was confused, as if he still didn't know what was going on. Those guys over there are bandits from Misty Mountain. They want to rob the few chefs left in our village. The young man said, looking at Bufang's familiar face. Rob chefs. Bufang's expression grew stranger and stranger. Bandits nowadays don't want money or beautiful women, but they want to rob chefs? Are chefs so popular outside the netherworld? Have I returned to the Heaven Chief realm? You don't know? The Divine Dynasty has opened the Divine Chef Temple and is recruiting chefs from all over the Divine Dynasty. As long as a talented chef signs up in the Divine Chef Temple, the power that sends the chef here will be rewarded with abundant source stones. The young man quickly explained when he saw the confused look on Bufang's face. After that, he looked at Bufang with an even stranger look. There's actually someone who doesn't know about this? When the news came out, the whole Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty was stirred. The surrounding great worlds were constantly sending excellent chefs to the Divine Chef Temple. The bandits also found a business opportunity. They robbed talented chefs from the villages and sent them to the Divine Chef Temple. They didn't need to recruit chefs from every village. As long as one of them was recruited, the reward would be enough for them to recoup their losses. Because the reward was a source stone. One source stone was enough for a 1-revolution Great Sage to cultivate to the 9-revolution Great Sage. Those were all resources. Well, this is a chef's spring. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth and said expressionlessly, "You are a passerby, aren't you? People often pass by our village. Unfortunately, your luck is really bad. You happened to run into bandits who came to rob our village, the young man said with emotion. It's a pity that all the chefs in our village have been robbed. These bandits are forcing us to hand over a chef. How can we do that? If we can't, they will slaughter the entire village. So we can only fight back. Bufang was a little speechless. This bandit is a little too much. Cooking requires talent, and not everyone can become a chef. Just as the young man and Bufang were talking in the distance, the bandits finally moved. The villagers trembled in fear. The great sage roared and tried to protect the village. Unfortunately, in the face of a demigod bandit, the experts in the village were no match for him. One by one, they flew backward, coughing up blood. As the bandits laughed sinisterly, the faces of the villagers immediately turned deathly pale. The young man who talked to Bufang picked up the hoe on the ground with righteous indignation and rushed out of the village like a madman. He wanted to join the fight. Bufang was slightly stunned. The world outside the netherworld seemed a little different from what he had imagined. Wasn't it said that there were demigods everywhere outside the netherworld, and gods were as numerous as dogs? Why were they fighting with such a primitive tool as a hoe? The battle was one-sided. Without a doubt, the bandits had suppressed everyone in the village. They dismounted, clasped their hands behind their backs, and walked leisurely into the village with the posture of victors. Then, they glanced disdainfully and coldly at the villagers. Hand over the hidden chef. That way, I will spare the lives of the people in your village. Otherwise, I will slaughter all of you. My brothers from Misty Mountain have slaughtered more villages than you have eaten salt. The demigod bandit sneered. Your Excellency, we really have no chefs left in our village. All the chefs have followed the team to the capital of the Divine Dynasty, or they have been robbed by other bandits. An old man said with a bitter face, unwilling and humiliated. They would accept it if they were robbing them of their money, but they were robbing their chef. If they had no chefs, they would slaughter the entire village. Wasn't this forcing them? Were they going to ask the village women to come out? But with their half-baked cooking skills, they could not be called chefs at all. Tisk, tsk. You're still so stubborn, old man. If I find out that there are still chefs in your village, I will make sure your village is slaughtered. The demigod bandit said coldly. His divine might spread in an instant, making all the people present tremble. The village chief, who was also the old man, blushed with grief and indignation. He smashed his walking stick hard on the ground. If you find chef, these old bones of mine will. The village chief still wanted to say something. However, the demigod bandit was too lazy to talk to him. He raised his hand and released a suction force. The village chief was instantly sucked into his hand, and his neck was grabbed by the bandit. Are the chefs in the village coming out? If they don't, we'll start slaughtering the entire village. We'll start with this old man. Don't blame us for being heartless. As long as you come out, everyone in the village can live. The bandit said coldly. However, no one came out of the village. Bufang looked at the trembling young man in the distance, and a strange look came over his face. Is the young man who pulled me into the village a chef? Is he the chef those bandits need? The young man was held back by a young woman, whose face was full of pleading, while the young man's face was full of struggle. I told you, there are no chefs left in the village. The old village chief said with difficulty, his face flushed. However, the demigod bandit just smiled indifferently. His eyes turned and fell on the young man held back by the young woman. As a demigod, he was not stupid. He naturally sensed the strangeness of the young man. The corners of his mouth curved upward slightly. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth froze. The air was filled with a rich aroma. That aroma did not come from the young man. The demigod bandit turned and looked at Bufang in the distance. At that moment, Bufang was holding an oyster pancake in his hand. He took a bite, which was steaming hot and fragrant. Well, you guys go ahead. I'll have an oyster pancake to recover. Bufang seemed to have sensed the demigod bandit's gaze. He waved the oyster pancake in his hand and said. The people around him were all dumbfounded. An oyster pancake to recover? Where did that come from? This guy was a chef? No one thought that the young man who had just entered the village was a chef? In this chaotic era, he, a chef, dared to wander around? Chapter 14:14. How dare a chef wander around in these chaotic times? That was the thought in the minds of everyone in the village at this moment. Both the villagers and the bandits looked confused. They had never imagined that the chef could appear so calmly in front of these bandits. Although the bandits needed chefs, they would not be very respectful to the chefs they had taken away, nor would they provide them with good food and drinks. No one knew if the chefs sent to the divine chef temple would really be accepted by the temple. Most of them were turned into corpses and died tragically in foreign land. The divine chef temple offered good benefits to the chefs who were accepted, and it would even provide them with source stones. However, it would not pay too much attention to those who were eliminated. Those who were eliminated were the losers, and no one cared about what happened to the losers. However, it had to be said that the pancakes smelled delicious. The people present couldn't help but twitch their noses. A rich aroma burst out of the pancake and crawled into their noses like little snakes. It tickled their taste buds. It smells so good. The people present couldn't help but narrow their eyes. The young man who brought Bufang into the village was shocked as well. He sniffed the aroma of the oyster pancake in the air, and his Adam's apple moved. It smells so good. I want to eat it. The young man was a chef, but not a very good one. He just loved cooking, so he devoted himself to learning how to cook. That was how he reached his current level and became a famous chef in the village. He was a good cook. It was because of this that his wife married him. However, he had been cooking for so many years, but he had never smelled such a delicious aroma. It was a smell that seemed to penetrate deep into his soul. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Bufang took a bite of the oyster pancake and chewed it slowly. His movements were neither fast nor slow. It was quite rhythmic. All the bandits were greedily wiping their saliva. How could they resist the aroma? Boss, this guy is definitely a chef. Look at what he's eating. It smells so good. One of the robbers wiped the saliva from his mouth. If it weren't for the fact that his boss was present, he would have rushed forward without hesitation, snatched the oyster pancake from Bufang's hand, and eaten it himself. He stuffed the last piece of oyster pancake into his mouth. Bufang exhaled softly. The oyster pancake was able to restore the energy within his body. The feeling of an endless supply of energy caused a relaxed expression to appear on Bufang's face. It was very comfortable. Voila! He poured himself a cup of steaming hot 9 Revolution Heavenly Path tea. Bufang took out another oyster pancake. They ate and drank tea. The demigod bandit could not hold it in any longer. His figure flashed, and he instantly appeared in front of Bufang. He looked at Bufang condescendingly. A terrifying aura burst forth from his body. "You are a chef?" the demigod bandit said with a fiendish smile. His eyes fell on the oyster pancake, and he could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He reached out his hand, grabbing Bufang's oyster pancake. "Come, let me have a taste. If it's delicious, then you're a chef." Without saying anything, the demigod bandit began to snatch the oyster pancake. The other bandits around were envious. The young man who had pulled Bufang into the village turned pale. He had harmed Bufang. If he had known this would happen, he would not have pulled Bufang into the village. That way, Bufang would not have been involved in this storm. However, soon everyone was stunned. Because in everyone's eyes, under the demigod bandit's terrifying pressure, the outstretched hand actually missed. He did not catch the oyster pancake in Bufang's hand. Bufang tilted his body slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly as he stuffed the oyster pancake into his mouth. As he bit down, His teeth broke the skin of the oyster pancake, causing the oil and the warm broth to flow out. The rich aroma blended and gushed out. You dare to dodge? The demigod bandit was instantly enraged. I'm the second master of the cloud mist sect. Who dares to disobey me? The second master's anger was uncontrollable. His eyes seemed to be bursting with terrifying fluctuations. He raised his hand and slapped Bufang's face. These days, he had beaten up at least 1,000 chefs, if not 800. He did not realize it before, but now that he had met them, he realized that these chefs were actually so arrogant. However, no matter how arrogant they could only tremble under his power. Therefore, when he learned that Bufang dared to resist, he did not hesitate to slap him. This scene caused the surrounding people to reveal looks of sympathy. Without a doubt, he had offended a demigod. This young man was probably going to suffer some physical pain. Some villagers could not bear to watch, so they covered their eyes. Patter! A crisp sound rang out. It was the sound of a slap and a face. In the next moment, in front of everyone's eyes, a figure flew backward and fell in the distance. However, to everyone's surprise, the person who fell in the distance was not Bufang. It was the demigod bandit, the second master of the cloud mist sect. Oh my God, what happened? Many people were confused, not knowing what had happened just now. Who was the one who helped Bufang block this move, and even gave him a slap in the face? The surrounding bandits' eyes were filled with disbelief. They saw clearly just now that the person who slapped their second master was none other than Bufang, who was eating the oyster pancake and drinking tea. He sent a demigod flying with a slap? Was this chef's cultivation so strong? Or was he just lucky? Bufang stuffed the last bite of the oyster pancake into his stomach, then clapped his hands leisurely. The true energy in his body had finally recovered, and his divine sense had almost recovered as well. With the nourishment of the oyster pancake, his recovery speed was very fast. At this moment, Bufang finally had the mood to look at the bandits. Robbing chefs? Bufang was very curious about this. What was the divine chef temple's background? Why did they rob so many chefs? How dare you hit me? I didn't know that you, a chef, have some strength, the demigod said coldly. He was just a chef. Even if he was a demigod, so what? Could he be compared to a bandit like him, who had gone through mountains of blades and seas of fire? Buzz, with a thought in his mind, the demigod bandit's pumpkin hammer appeared in his hand in an instant. With a rumble, the hammer smashed toward Bufang's head. Whoosh! The air seemed to be collapsing inch by inch from the impact. Even if you are a chef, that's not a reason for you to be so unscrupulous. I'm going to beat you half to death and drag you back. The second master growled. His divine sense surged out of his body as he smashed the hammer toward Bufang. Runes of law emerged on the hammer, and the power of law surged. As soon as the power of law appeared, the pressure instantly caused the experts present to feel so stifled that they couldn't even breathe. Oh? The law of force? Bufang looked at the power of law lingering on the hammer. The corners of his mouth curved slightly. He stopped Xiaobai, who was about to strike. Then, he showed a hint of interest. Facing the hammer, he raised his Taotai arm. The bandage unraveled, and the yin and yang energy swirled. The hammer smashed down. Bufang threw out a palm toward the hammer. You want to catch my hammer with your bare hands? You skinny chef. Where did your confidence come from? The second master sneered. The bandits around him also showed a mocking look. Their second master comprehended the law of force, and with a hammer, he could flatten a mountain. Looking at Bufang's skinny face, he actually dared to catch it with his bare hands. They were afraid that his hands would be broken. The villagers also sucked in a breath of cold air, frightened by Bufang's arrogance. Boom! Under everyone's watchful eyes, the pumpkin hammer and Bufang's palm collided, producing a deafening explosion. A moment later, the scene that people had imagined did not happen. The pumpkin hammer was caught. Bufang held the hammer with one hand, his face expressionless as he glanced at the second master. Then, he squeezed his hand and the hammer caved in. With a gotcha sound, fine veined patterns appeared on it. In just a moment it was crushed. With a swoosh, it fell to the ground. The second master was dumbfounded. The surrounding bandits and villagers also found it hard to believe. Could it be that this skinny chef also comprehended the law of force? Otherwise, how could Bufang crush the second master's hammer with his bare hands? How strong was Bufang? At least in the demigod realm, he was basically invincible. Even the proud sons of heaven of the divine dynasty would have to bear a grudge in front of Bufang. He had the divine flame, which had devoured 2 laws, and the law of transmigration. His divine sense had been enhanced by the god of cooking's menu, and his spirit sea, which had been enhanced by the yin and yang poles, could basically crush his peers. He might even be able to put up a fight against gods. The second master's pupils constricted when he saw the hammer explode. He took a step back and crushed a communication jade stone. The next moment he shouted, "Retreat!" The bandits dashed out of the village in a frenzy. Bufang's strength was beyond their expectations. He was probably the son of a high-ranking official in the divine dynasty, or a top disciple of some big sect who had come out to explore the world. Facing an existence fully equipped with high-level equipment, the second master wisely chose to retreat. His lackeys ran even faster than him. After all, as bandits, if they didn't know how to protect themselves, they would have died long ago. If they couldn't win, they would run away. That was the rule of bandit. Bufang shook his hand. After all, the law of force was the power of the law. The recoil made his palms sting. "Xiao Bai, stop them," the second master said. "You can strip them and tie them up. I have questions to ask them." Bufang rubbed his fingers and said faintly. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. With a clanging sound, the 3 flags behind him unfurled, and a long spear swept out. The surrounding villagers were all dumbfounded. The sudden change in the situation caught them off guard. Looking at Bufang's posture, was he going to keep these bandits here? Wait. The old village chief's expression suddenly changed. The head of the Misty Mountain Bandits was a god who had truly comprehended the power of the law. If Bufang really kept these bandits here, he would be in big trouble. Chapter 14-15. The bandits ran as fast as they could. A look of horror came over their faces. How could this chef's fighting prowess be so fearsome? It turns out that those chefs who only know how to wield kitchen knives and ladles also have such formidable fighting prowess. I can't believe he's able to crush their second-in-command to the ground. Their second-in-command is a demigod who has comprehended the power of the law. One by one, the bandits fled frantically. The second-in-command was not stupid. After fighting Bufang, he knew that Bufang's strength was not something he could resist. Whether it was in terms of strength or the law, Bufang seemed to be much stronger than him. Yes, when Bufang crushed his pumpkin hammer, the second-in-command knew that the chef was actually a demigod. At the thought of that, fear and passion spread in his heart at the same time. If he could capture a chef of this level and sell him to the divine chef temple, he might be able to get a source treasure from the temple. Source treasures were the essence of source stones, which could help demigods comprehend the laws and advance to the god realm more easily. Such treasures were very precious. However, there was indeed such a reward in the list of rewards announced by the divine chef temple. Therefore, the second-in-command was very excited and passionate. After all, Bufang was only a demigod, while their leader was a god. When their leader arrived, this chef would not be able to escape even if he had wings. However, the most important thing now was to get out of here. Rumble. The second-in-command was very strong, and he ran very fast. His figure shot out of the village like an arrow, and in the blink of an eye, he was almost out of sight. The surrounding bandits also dispersed in an instant. The village chief looked anxious, and the others in the village looked relieved. The other people in the village revealed expressions of relief. They had been suppressed by these bandits for too long. Now that they saw the bandits fleeing in a sorry state, it was as if they had vented their anger. Bufang was very calm. He was fiddling with the silver divine flame in his hand. His eyes flickered, and his divine sense spread out in an instant. His divine sense spread, bringing with it a great sense of oppression. An oppressive aura swept out and quickly locked onto the misty cloud mountain's second head, who was frantically trying to escape. With a stomp of his foot, a huge crater appeared on the ground as he rapidly fled into the distance. Suddenly, his expression changed. That was because a silver flame suddenly appeared in front of him and floated quietly. The flames burned, bringing with it a terrifying heat and burning sensation. It was as if his divine sense was being burned. Without any hesitation, the second head turned around and ran in another direction. He wanted to escape. However, under the seal of Bufang's divine sense, everything he did was in vain. The silver flames turned into a long dragon and coiled around his body. It was as if a chain had locked him in place. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered. The flag behind him fluttered, and in the next moment, he stabbed it into the ground in the distance. The spear swept out horizontally. The clanging sound was like a giant dragon charging. The silver divine dragon roared. A loud boom resounded. A stream of light shot past at high speed. Then, one figure after another was sent flying, and all of them were flung into the air. Their faces were filled with fear as they found that they couldn't use the power in their bodies. At that moment it was as if they had been imprisoned. What kind of monster was that iron lump? Rip, rip. The sound of cloth ripping rang out. Then all the bandits let out miserable howls. They fell on the ground. Every bandit's clothes were torn apart, revealing their naked bodies. They shrank on the ground, their faces filled with fear. How could they bully others like that? Stripping their clothes? Boom! A loud sound echoed. The second head was also brought back. He sat on the ground, and his forehead was already full of cold sweat. They were both demigods, but why was the gap between him and Bufang so huge? In front of Bufang, he felt that he was as weak as an ant. They didn't even have the chance to resist, and they were already defeated. If Bufang wanted to kill him, it would be a piece of cake. Was there such a powerful demigod in this world? However, the look in the second head's eyes became much sharper. He had already sent a message to his boss. If this chef didn't kill him, when their boss arrived, it would be the chef's death anniversary. Their boss was a god who had comprehended the complete power of the law. Even in the divine dynasty, gods had extremely noble statuses, and they could enter the court as officials. No matter how strong this chef was, he was just a demigod. When a demigod faced a true god, the outcome was easy to guess. Bufang flicked his finger. Immediately, a silver flaming dragon flew out. It bound the bandits, stripped them naked, and tied them together. To him, this was as easy as lifting a finger. In the distance, the old village chief walked over with a cane, his face filled with fear. Go, young man. These bandits are from Misty Mountain, and their leader is a great thief god. If you don't go, you will be punished by that god. The old village chief's face was full of bitterness. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Bufang, however, shook his head and signaled the old village chief not to worry. Bufang took out another oyster pancake and ate it. As soon as the delicious oyster pancake entered his mouth, a delicious aroma spread in his mouth, making Bufang feel very comfortable. The energy in his body began to grow, allowing his strength to recover rapidly. To face a god, he had to stay in his best state. Village Chief, is this place far from the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty's capital? While waiting, Bufang asked the village chief while eating the oyster pancake. The village chief sat down, leaning on his cane. Sniffing the oyster pancake's aroma, he swallowed and answered, "This place is at the edge of the great world where the Xiai divine dynasty is located, and it's still far from the capital. But I know that the chefs in our village have gone to the largest nearby city, then boarded the divine chef temple's warship to go to the capital. Of course, the bandits of Misty Mountain also have their own warship, and they have the means to go to the capital," the old village chief said. Bufang fell silent. He had to go to the Xiai divine dynasty's capital. However, taking the warship provided by the divine chef temple to the nearest city mentioned by the village chief was one way, but it seemed a little troublesome. The second method was much simpler. It was more convenient for him to take one of the pirates' warships and go there. So, the corners of Bufang's mouth curved upward slightly, and a playful expression came over his face. He glanced at the second chief, who was stripped naked and tied up in the middle of the village, and the corners of his mouth curved into a meaningful smile. The second chief felt a chill run through him. Then, his pupils constricted when he met Bufang's gaze. "This chef captured us but didn't kill us. What's going on? Does that meaningful look in his eyes mean that he has taken a fancy to my beauty?" The second chief was worried. However, he quickly calmed down because their boss was about to arrive. As long as their leader arrived, this chef would certainly become his prisoner. Rumble, sure enough, it didn't take long. The sky above the village changed. Dark clouds came rumbling from the distance, bringing with them a terrible pressure. As soon as the pressure appeared, it suppressed the crowd and made it difficult for them to breathe. This was divine power, purer than that of a demigod. It was truly terrifying. The sound of hooves rang out. A dragon-scale horse galloped over from a distant mountain path, moving like a bolt of lightning. The horse neighed. A large group of people galloped over from a distance and stopped in front of the village. A terrible aura pervaded the air. At the same time, figures leaped off the dragon-scale horse. Rumble! In the sky, a figure stepped through the air, and the power of law circulated around his body. An expert dressed in a wild robe stepped through the air, his eyes filled with sharpness. Hovering over the village, he looked down at the group of people. This was the leader of Mount Misty, the legendary bandit chief, and the only god of Mount Misty. The bandits, who were tied up by Bufang, were instantly excited. Their eyes were filled with hope. The second chief's muscles were twitching with excitement. He looked at Bufang fiercely. "This arrogant chef is finished." As soon as the bandit chief appeared, he saw the group of bandits tied up in the middle of the village. A cold look appeared on the chief's face. "You're just a small village. You're courting death," the chief said coldly. Then, he waved his hand. Outside the village, the experts who had surrounded the bandits became indifferent. They drew their bows and shot arrows. One arrow after another shot out. They shot toward the panic-stricken villagers in the village. If they were hit, blood would flow like a river. The villagers were shaking, their faces full of fear. The villagers were also shivering. Was their village going to be completely massacred like the other villages? Bufang stood up, his face cold and serious. The arrows that shot at him from all directions seemed to be tearing apart his psychic energy. Slaughtering the village? It was really overbearing. In his spirit sea, his divine sense true form, which was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened its eyes. Buzz Bufang's divine sense swept out with a rumble, spreading like ripples. The densely packed arrows that were shooting over all stopped in the air. His divine sense burst out like a storm, shattering all the arrows. In the sky the chief's eyes were fixed on Bufang. It seemed that Bufang was the reason why this village dared to resist. It turned out that they had found a demigod expert. Unfortunately, in front of him, a demigod was nothing. Boom! The chief's aura burst out like a flash flood. Then, he descended from the sky step by step. His divine might was like a mountain pressing down on Bufang's body, trying to press Bufang to the ground. As a god, if he couldn't even suppress a demigod, what was the use of him? You're just a demigod. How dare you offend my cloud mist mountain and capture the bandits of my mountain? Die. Boom. The chief's eyes suddenly lit up. Runes of law rolled out from his body, and a terrible force came toward Bufang. Chapter 14:16. At this moment, Xiao Bai was like a demon god, suppressing the whole place. No wonder he can defeat a god with his demigod cultivation base. All that was left was a miserable howl. The silver divine flame instantly leaped out, shooting out rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it landed on the great steward's body. Now you know how to dodge? The law of transmigration emerged on the Taotai arm. Even though it was not the complete law, its aura was still there. The silver flame flickered, and the complete power of the law emerged on it. The chief flew into a rage. His spear was stabbed and sent flying. In the Xiai divine dynasty, a god could even become an official in the court. Of course, an ordinary god would not get a high official position. The bandage spread. Bufang hovered in the sky, his vermilion robe fluttering. He's too strong. The power of a god is too terrible. He found that his power of the law seemed to be unable to do anything to Bufang. A saber light slashed down from the heavens. Wherever the saber light passed, everything shattered. The flag fell. The chief thrust his spear with a backhand, operating the law of wind and snow to the extreme. Then, he slapped his palm down toward Bufang's head, trying to kill Bufang. The surrounding bandits shuddered and looked at Bufang as if they were looking at a demon. The palm came down from the sky, aimed at Bufang, trying to kill this guy who had offended their misty mountain. Die! Flames immediately wrapped around it and began to burn fiercely. Then, he turned into a silver rock. Every thrust of the spear left a black hole in the void. The surrounding bandits were also indescribably terrified. Suddenly, a burly figure seemed to appear behind him. The supreme law of the universe? The next moment, Bufang raised his palm slightly and stopped Xiao Bai. The great leader felt a sense of danger. The corners of Bufang's mouth curved upward. A rumble rang out. Xiao Bai, you take care of the others. Leave this god to me. I also want to see how my current combat strength is. However, if one became an official of the divine dynasty, he would basically have a meteoric rise. Even though he was only a god who had comprehended one law. The flame burned quietly. Even the violent snowstorm did not affect the flame in Bufang's hand in the slightest. A gun was aimed at Bufang's head. The might of a god's attack was naturally extraordinary. Although Bufang had great faith in Lord Go's strength, his figure instantly disappeared on the spot as if he had teleported. A terrifying strength exploded forth and the head's face changed. Boom! The great leader was engulfed by the divine flame. However, he was still somewhat worried. After all, the capital of the divine dynasty was not comparable to the netherworld. When he reappeared, he was in the distance, charging toward a demigod. The spear was lifted up like a raging dragon. This fellow was looking down on gods too much. The vermilion robe instantly fluttered. One blade. Slaying immortals. Everyone in the village was dumbfounded. The snow wind dragon was fighting with many bandits. Under the burning of the silver rock, the snow wind dragon melted inch by inch and gradually disappeared. Bufang naturally had no sympathy for the bandits of the Cloud Mist Mountain. Bufang said lightly. The bandits' bodies exploded in an instant. The villagers were dumbfounded. Even their head's divine sense couldn't escape before he was burned to ashes. A demigod actually knocked a god out of the sky. Therefore, demigods and gods were still high-level existences. The eyes of the Cloud Mist Mountain's head burst out with brilliant light. That's right, monstrous waves seemed to rise in his spirit sea. Bufang's figure crossed the sky and approached the snow wind dragon in an instant. The rock spread its wings and approached the snow wind dragon in the blink of an eye. The flames suddenly became violent. For example, the misty mountain was considered the most powerful force in the surrounding area. However, the misty mountain only had a god as its leader. "How dare you!" The head of the cloud mist mountain was not angry. The head wasn't angry. Instead, he laughed. This demigod actually wanted to use his own strength to resist a god? A long spear suddenly enlarged in front of his eyes, instantly piercing through his head. Bufang stood there, his expression unchanged. The entire ground seemed as though it was about to collapse. The frightening might caused everyone's breathing to become hurried. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the entire village, Bufang soared into the sky. His fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. As a god, he didn't expect that his snow wind law would actually melt in the flame. The youth in front of him was actually a monster who comprehended the supreme law of the universe. Xiao Bai's gaze turned over. The old village chief's body was trembling, and he was almost lying on the ground. The terrifying power of the law brushed against his face. As for the other few heads, the strongest was only a demigod. The head didn't expect that Bufang would actually dare to take a mile after taking an inch. It was as if the world was about to collapse. To become a god, one only needed to comprehend the power of the law. For ordinary people, the power of the law was very mysterious and not something that could be comprehended by ordinary people. Although the strange flame made him a little afraid, it was just a little fear. It suppressed the head to the point that he couldn't even operate his law. The head's face became incomparably terrified. Naturally, Bufang didn't have a good impression of bandit. He had spared the second head's life just to lure these head bandits here. The spear had a red tassel, which fluttered in the wind. When it thrust out, it seemed to pierce holes in the sky. He stepped on the void and charged out again. Facing a god, he didn't dodge or evade. Xiao Bai was like a demon god. In a flash, he came in front of the head, fearlessly facing a god. Moreover, he needed the bandits' warships to go to the capital of the divine dynasty. Bufang said. Bits of coldness filled the air. But they were gods after all. They deserved to die. The flame burned out. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. The battle had ended in a one-sided fashion. In an instant, the wind and snow swept over violently. They watched as the man and the puppet slaughtered the Mount Yunwu bandits, who were awe-inspiring in all directions. Bufang flicked his fingers. If the head of Cloud Mist Mountain hadn't committed a crime, he wouldn't have chosen to become a bandit. The wind and snow swept across the sky. You're courting death. The terrible power and burning power that burst out of Bufang's fist made his face turn very unsightly. He was a god. How could he be afraid of a demigod? He wanted to meet the Lord Go and the others as soon as possible. An expert who comprehended such a law could not be defeated by ordinary people. A deep pit appeared in the ground. The dragon bone kitchen knife emerged. His eyes flashed. The law of wind and snow. The second leader stared blankly at the fallen first leader and the countless dead and injured bandits. His body started to tremble violently like a sieve. Boom! It spun in Bufang's hand, emitting a dazzling golden light. On the ground, the old village chief was shivering. Bufang had brought him endless danger. The head's eyes flashed. He threw a palm toward Bufang. Instantly, an icy frost snow dragon emerged in the sky, facing the majestic snow wind dragon. The villagers were all stunned. Clang! The Cloud Mist Mountain bandits, who had caused the resentment of the surrounding villages, were killed just like that. Wrapped in the wind and snow, it pounced toward Bufang. Suddenly, a silver flame appeared in his palm. A miserable howl rang out. Xiao Bai held the spear, his mechanical eyes shining brightly. The divine flame, which had once again devoured the power of a law, felt even more pressurized. After slaughtering countless villages, they were finally punished. The divine flame flew back to Bufang's hand. His mind flickered. If Bufang was strong, Xiaobai would be strong. He gently exhaled. Immediately, a spear emerged in his hand. Although the great world where the Xiai divine dynasty was located was much more prosperous than the great netherworld, and its overall strength was stronger, gods were not that common. They felt that everything in front of them was so illusory. Their leader was a powerful entity, a true god. And yet, he had just been killed in this very moment. He retreated quickly. The runes of law swept out, and a terrible divine might descended, filling the air and suppressing the whole place. Blood splattered everywhere, and the remnant soul frantically escaped, but it was also absorbed by Whitey. Bufang raised his Taotai arm and threw a punch at the red spear. The power of a god made him unable to even have the slightest desire to resist. What flame is this? He wanted to crush Bufang with the complete power of the law. Although Xiaobai did not comprehend the law, his fighting prowess was not weaker than that of a demigod, and it was even comparable to that of an ordinary god. The head chef's expression changed abruptly, and he sucked in a cold breath. He charged into the midst of the bandits and continued to kill. It was as if there was no one who could stop him. The head chef looked as if he had seen a ghost. He reached out a hand and touched his waist. However, that was all. There were no other changes. Perhaps it was because the head chef's power of law was too weak. Like a cannonball, he was shot down from the sky. Damn it! I'm a god! Bufang exhaled softly. Even the law of fire could not melt his law of wind and snow so easily. Xiaobai seemed to understand Bufang's words. He raised his hand and touched his Taotai arm. The head chef's eyes burst with light, which seemed to tear the sky apart. The Taotai arm emerged in an instant. The two collided, producing a deafening rumble. It smashed hard to the ground. Stepping in midair, Bufang's divine sense exploded out. The knife light collided with the red spear. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.